Pocket Realm, a Mortal Realms short story phase. Grab your hammer so we can clear a path through the chaos and forge our own narratives in the Age of Sigmar. Your allies through the realm gates this episode are...
I'm Davy, and I'm glad to be back on the Pocket Realm so we can keep the Mortal Realms spreading like a necrotic rash across the realms of podcasting.
Go Rose. And I'm Aaron, and if you approach come at the Archpustulent, you best not slip miss. Hey, I don't know, normally in the other shows I have a little blurb here, but I don't. I'm just going to say, hey, Davey, how's it going?
It's going good. How are you?
This blurb enough. I'm doing just fine. Apparently the coffee's still in my veins, and we're running wild here. Everybody, we're back doing the Pocket Realms. That's cool. We had to take a little break. I guess I can blame it on COVID or because I was feeling lazy. I don't really have a good answer for that. But we figured we'd get back in the saddle, the Pocket Realm saddle, and try and talk about another short story. I feel like people aren't talking about short stories these days, and so we've got to carry that torch. And today we're going to talk about the short story called The Unlamented Archpustulent of Clan Morbidus. Is Archpustulent probably the way you say that word?
That's how I'd say it. Yeah.
Yeah, right.
Archpustulent. Archangel. Archpustulent.
I spent away. Yeah, but Archbishop though. So I spent a little bit Googling this and I couldn't find a clear answer. But this is a short story by David Guymer, friend of the show, whether he likes it or not.
Or knows it or not.
Whether he knows it or not. But before we get there, let's take a moment, take a moment to just catch people up with what we've been up to. I think in the short stories phase, I phrase it as this. What was the last hobby you did, game you played, or book that you read that you wanted to talk about? Because they're supposed to be short. We're keeping it short.
Yeah. I'll hit you with two. I've been painting my chosen axes for Underworlds. They're almost done. Excited about that. They're sitting right here in front of me.
Sure. And, top tier Underworlds warband.
Yeah, exactly. Defining the meta. And then the last book I read that would be relevant to this, I read Station 11. It's a post-apocalyptic sci-fi thing, which I may introduce to our book club. Put it up as a candidate when it's back around to my turn to throw some out there.
Which, who knows when that'll ever be. There's so many people.
Quite a while, yeah. That's all right. Big
rotation. And my end, I'll do two then too. One is I just read The End of Enlightenment by Richard Strachan. I'm not sure how to say it, but it's a Luminous Realm Lords novel. It was actually pretty good. I really liked his Blood of the Everchosen novel. So I was hyped to follow up with this one, and I think it's just as good. It was enlightening, right? I learned a lot about the Realm Lords through the lens of this here story, and I recommend it.
I read Blood of the Everchosen at your recommendation. Not the most recent book I've read, but I enjoyed it quite a bit. It was cool.
Yeah, I really like that one too. I think I prefer that one just slightly more, but by no means does that detract from this End of Enlightenment. And then as far as games I played, Davy, we had some of the Mortal Realms crew, a couple of them, over to my deck to play the smaller of the Warhammer games, under the lights, like a professional baseball game. Anyways, so Phil and Pavent came over, and they themselves played a real quick game of Underworlds, and then I took Pavent on in a game of Warcry, a Catacombs version 1, which I had never played. He beat me, but it was close. It came down to the last dice roll, and it was tons of fun, and I think maybe we might start doing it possibly more regularly, despite the fact that this last time it was actually pretty cold. I don't know when people are going to listen to this, but like at the end of April, it was still pretty chilly out there. But we persevered.
Cool.
Tons of fun. And maybe we'll get you out here sooner rather than later.
We'd be glad to.
Out here makes it sound like I live far away. No, I live in town. It's not out here. All right, cool. Let's get that's done and over with. Done and dusted. Let us chat about this book in this story phase.
In the story phase, we delve into the stories, characters, creatures, and environments of the 9 realms.
That feels right. But you got to read the story blurb too, whether you like it or not.
So in this case, Radigan Borkris seeks to ascend to Archpustulent of Clan Morbidus, but first he must plot and scheme to remove rivals and position himself just right for the role.
If he's going to plot and scheme, I feel like he's already got great qualifications for the position.
That's just Tuesday in Skaven land. So
Bare bones. That's the top line. No cover sheet necessary. Anyways, I haven't applied for a new job in forever. We're going to stick to spoiler free. Not that anybody really cares. These are so short that in the time we just went through our intro, you could have already read the book. But just out of tradition, let's stick to this process. First and foremost, I want to talk about why we're reading this book. I don't know I forget who nominated it. We were talking about which book we want or story we wanted to read. Did you have any reasons why this jumped out at you as something we selected?
Yeah, you sent a screenshot of the titles that were up there as decent candidates. There was probably 10 or 12 of them. And then as soon as I saw the title of this, I'm like, I mean, it almost kind of has to be that one, right? You're done. So.
It's self-selecting with a title like that. He knew what he was doing. Guymer was aware of what he was accomplishing there. Yep, I agree. Again, it's the Unlamented Archpustulent of Clan Morbidus. That's a mouthful. So yeah, definitely very cool. To add on to that, and I think honestly the name is enough, but I feel like it's been a bit since we've gotten, I'll say, a pestilence perspective, or maybe even a Skaven perspective. At least for me, we've been reading a lot of the different campaign books in the main story phase and a few other novels. And the Skaven have sort of continued to be more plot devices as opposed to story drivers these days, and even especially from a clan's Eshin perspective, in that if a main character or a main bad guy needs something dastardly done secretively, they'll call up clan Eshins and they'll get it done, often to disastrous results. But I can't remember the last time I read something from a Skaven perspective, or specifically a pestilence perspective, and so that seemed ripe for revisiting. So
yeah, I would say for me the closest I would call to having read something from a Skaven perspective are some of the chapters from Hamilcar.
Yeah, true. Mm-hmm.
But that wasn't particularly pestilence, and that was a while ago. They're few and far between, so it was kind of a cool reason to check this one out.
So I'm thinking they're due, and this short story I don't think disappoints. I think it covered what I was looking for in a nice, tidy package. So that's the why we're reading it. Do you have any other whys?
No. I think it's solid, and we know that we like David Guymer stuff, so it's a safe spot to jump off from with a return to some of this Pocket Realm content.
Yeah, I don't give out the title friend of the show all willy nilly. It's well earned. So let's a couple more W questions. We can talk about, when does this story take place? No idea.
Don't care. Doesn't
don't
matter.
Particularly care. Yeah. There's no overarching plot or not plot, but tie-ins to anything that's going on. In fact, it's very self-contained within its setting. So yeah, who knows? Unless something drastically changes to this Skaven in the future, I think the story can take place anytime, anywhere. Not anywhere. Nope. Specifically in a place. Let's talk about that place. Where does the story take place, Davy?
As Blight City, so the sort of Skaven capital, and there's some cool reminders in here about how it sort of exists outside the realms. It's in this weird, that the Skaven have this cool thing where they're sort of tunneling. Their jam was tunneling in the world that was, and now they tunnel between the realms, and so they end up in this weird unspace or whatever. And you actually snagged the same quote I did here. Entropy was to the realm of ruin as heat was to Akshi, or darkness to Ulgu. I was like, oh yeah, because every time they talk about the city's just rusting and falling apart and chaotic, and it's pretty rad, really.
Yeah. And it's always failing, but then growing at the same time, which is pretty cool. I don't know whether that's from the Battle Tome or some other story, but it seems it's always crushing the layer below it and just continuously being built up in a never-ending skyward, or whatever the sky is, trajectory. I guess it's probably underground too. So
I think it really feels like a nightmare city in the way. I was unsettled a little bit by when you really stop to kind of think about it. It's kind of claustrophobic or I don't know, just so uncontrolled. Feels very Skaven-y. Yeah,
and it's the sort of place that how could you ever? There's no scenario in which you would ever feel safe in this location. Which they're probably, they're used to. That's par for the course for these guys. Speaking of of these guys, who are we following? Who are we talking about? And I guess that kind of ties into the what as well as to what the story is about. But what sorts of characters are we following here? I'll keep asking you.
Yeah. I don't see anyone else here. You talking about? There was Radigan Borchris is who it opens upon, and it follows him as well as Macalit Puss. So I guess Macalit is a second in command. So it feels like Denkror, Radigan, and Haskrable are kind of the three lead competitors for this thing that they're competing for. Nailed that sentence.
No, perfect, flawless. You've done this before, I can tell. So it's basically a fight for supremacy. It's a political intrigue kind of story within the ranks of a Skaven Pestilence, I guess, clan, because they said it at the top, right? In Clan Morbidus, that's in the title even. And so there's a vacancy, there's a power vacuum a little bit, and we walk through the process of how that power vacuum is filled and the ways that the Skaven uniquely fill it by sort of following these, what you can imagine could have potentially been three very similar characters. And in a sense they are, but the book does a good job of differentiating them and maybe helping you choose which one you want to root for, if you want to root for any of them, really. Though, I mean, we're Warhammer fans. I'm sure there's something that we can identify with these characters. But it's an interesting motley crew, that's for sure. Any other who's or what's or any W word waffles, wacky?
No, I think we got it. I think we've got it pretty covered here.
Yeah, I think we did. All right, so let's jump into a full spoiler conversation in the spoiler phase. Paul's not here to do it in his cool voice. We talked about the characters. We talked about, we had mentioned Radigan, Borchris, Haskrable, Denkror. As we were sort of alluding to, they're vying for this Archpustulent position. I think the beginning of the book is we're initially introduced to Radigan, and we get sort of what he's all about. Do you want to talk about him, or do you want me to talk about him? You can talk about the next guy.
So Radigan, he's already pretty powerful. They all have these names that I'm like, I mean, that sounds important, but I have no sense of like how, so he's the malfeasant superior of the Church of Gnawing Ruin. And maybe somebody's heard of that before. I haven't. And it kind of talks about he's the spiritual overseer to 1,000,000 unworthy souls, 2 layers spread like a necrotic rash across the realms of metal and death. So he's wealthy, but he's not at the top of the ladder yet, right? But he's eyeing that. And it seems like what everyone's angling for, what he's angling for, is this position, which will get him closer to the council of 13. Or is it actually a seat on the Council of 13 with this?
I think it's maybe just yet another step towards it.
Yeah.
Because I think it's like it's a position in the hierarchy of the clan itself, but I don't think it's necessarily the leader of the clan. Is the gist I get.
Yeah, just gets you closer to it.
Yeah.
And so he's already, he's intricately attired. He has lots of people preening over him, and he wants it. As he demonstrates by shoving a slave out the window. His second in command is like, "Why would you want a position so exposed?" Is because I could do this. Shoves Skaven out the window to anyone at any time. Okay.
Yep.
There you go.
Big highlight of the story for me. It kind of draws. Well, I'll tell you what. He's very much the he's the righteous gemstones version of. That's how I'll phrase it. Of this Skaven religion that they've got going on here. So they call it. So they're followers of the Withered Word, which is whether or not it's their specific brand of like pestilence followership of the corruptor aspect of the Great Horned Rat, or maybe it's universally what the pestilence groups call it. I can't remember, and I don't remember picking it up in the battle tome, but it's you get a sense that a lot of these different sort of leadership positions have their own brand or their own like sects of this religion. And Radican's cool because like I think later on in the book they talk about like how he has his own interpretation, and he sort of bends some of the rules in terms of how he follows it.
One example of just how besides his apparent wealth and his cool spot he's got at the top of a tower, he's pretty blessed by the corruptor, because one of the slaves who's getting him dressed accidentally nicks one of his boils and then barfs himself to death, basically. Ooh, gnarly.
And this is for Skaven, who presumably has been exposed to all sorts of gnarly stuff to begin with. Like even for him, it just drops him dead. And I'll just mention he's got an underling, an under Dicken of the presbyotic wilt, who is this Maculate pus, who was sort of tending to him amongst all these other Skaven slaves. We don't get a lot of personality out of him quite yet, but I think he develops as the story goes. There's another, I think they're priests, like pestilence priests, Skaven priests, named Hascribble. And so he goes with the title of the first claw broken of the Scratching Ruin, I think is his title, or at the very least, he's like the lead of the Scratching Ruin. And he's got a fun little backstory. They talk through it, whether it's here or later, that he's busy, I don't want to say ranting or raving, but he's getting a fire and brimstone. He's preaching to like this congregation of Skaven in front of him, because he's so incredibly fanatic and devout, a follower to the corruptor aspect of the Great Horned Rat. He's a blind seer of some sort, but he didn't start off in the ranks of the Skaven Pestilence hierarchy, but rather he was born a slave and in some sort of dark and horrible forced labor camp. He became more and more fanatic and like devout, and won over more and more folks to his cause, and he was able to sort of rise through the ranks and grow his own underground like movement, so that he gained more and more power and reached the sort of upper echelons of the leadership of the Scratching Ruin. But he's blind, but he doesn't let that stop him to get what he wants and reach for power. He claims that he doesn't care for the position sort of personally, like it's not as important to him, just that he's only pursuing it because that's what the Great Horned Rat wants, and so far be it for him to sort of deny the calling. So he's like, I got to do what I got to do, and so that's why he's interested in the position.
Yeah, he was pretty cool. The idea of like being able to go from slave all the way to a position of power is pretty something else. I mean, you talk about like 1 in a million, it may be even less than that, right? Just
right.
Sheer numbers of Skaven that live and die.
Mm-hmm. And it's not even because he particularly is he's not a deadly, I mean, he ends up being a deadly character. It's through like fervor and like winning people to his cause that like he was able to ascend the ranks, so to speak. So I think the book or the story kind of starts with these two characters. We get in a little bit of their backstory through internal monologues and their conversations with their underlings, and they talk about how there's going to be this vote for the Archpustulent position, which is weird. You wouldn't expect Skaven to be big on democracy, but they are sort of counting their votes and trying to like scheme even ahead of time just to make sure that they've got as much clout on their side and have bought as many votes as necessary. But it quickly leads into the process of the voting, which is, I guess, relatively interesting, though at the same time a little mundane.
Yeah.
What did you think of that process?
So there was the sort of lobbying ahead of time where they're kind of counting up how many votes they expected to have, and then everyone comes up and drops them in. I think the same deal. I was like, oh well, yeah, like mundane, I think is a good word for it. Like, fair enough. But they have all these different rules, like you're not supposed to fight in here, or you're not supposed to, draw blades or kill each other, but like it's not really stabbing somebody if you just happen to have your knife out and they run into it, like there's the usual like Skaven get around the rules sort of things. But there's some pretty beefy enforcers here that when things get out of hand, they can try and clamp down on it. But there's some important people who aren't here right now.
Ooh, that's right? True. Yeah. I think maybe you're probably talking about, is it Dang? Isn't that, I don't know how to say that. It's like, is a fever? Dang is a type of fever.
Yeah. I'm assuming that's what it's. Dengue.
Oh, maybe it's Dengue. Anyways, Cruor. I'm going to not use his first name anymore because he's also known as the Verminable Cruor. And so he's a master of alchemy and pox magic. And it's notable that he's not here at this vote that they're holding, right? So it's all these leaders of their different sects are casting their votes for this new position. But this Verminable Cruor isn't there. And then also we're missing another individual. I think it's Drassic. I already forget who it is. But so there's two folks missing from the 21 leaders of their congregations, which I thought was odd. Why would there not be 13? That seems like it's a weird number to use here, but there's 21. The scene cuts over to what the Verminable Cruor is up to. He's just hanging out in his lab, him and his best bud, the other missing leader of the congregations, and he's performing mad experiments on them. And so the guy, again, I think is it Drassic? Must be Drassic. The guy strapped to the table is first cursing him out and threatening him, and then he realizes that's not working. So then he has to beg, "Hey, just let me go. I'll give you anything you want." But that's not enough. And one of the better scenes in the story, Cruor gets closer and closer with some clippers or something like that, and you think he's going to do something terrible to the rat strapped to his table. But he doesn't. He just clips off a whisker, and the rat breathes out a sigh of relief. I breathe out a sigh of relief. Everybody breathes out a sigh of relief. And you think, oh, it's not that bad. He has the whisker do a little concoction. He adds a bunch of other esoteric ingredients, and it seems like everything's going to end up okay. But then he's sort of reading off the recipe, and it turns out that he needed this whisker 13 breaths before the death of its owner, and then he turns around and slices the dude's throat and kills him right then on the table. Which that was a creative, that was new. I didn't expect that. That was
my favorite follow up to this was that so he gets it and he's like turns over like he's mixing the brew, and he looks at Dressic, who's like choking out his last, and he frowns. He's like staring at him, waiting for him, and pounds him on the chest one more time. So he's like, everyone's like, exactly 13 breaths. It was just such a Skaven science moment. Like, hey, if you got to cheat the science, you got to cheat the science. It's fine.
Yeah, it's science is an exact, man. It's more of an art than it is a science. And that was great. And so you see why he's missing his right, because he's performing this experiment. He has an underling too, who's named Gagric, and says, hey, leader, master, we got that vote right now. And he's like, no, I don't think so. And he's like, no, it's right now. And he's like, well, honestly, they're going to just hold a revote anyway, or a recount anyway. So I don't really need to be there now. It's more important that I'm there later. So I've got more important matters, and it's this experiment that this concoction that he's brewing. And so we're left with wondering what he's up to. And then in order to shift the scene back, he casts also pretty interesting spell where it chews up a worm, spits into a plate or something, rubs a little rune into it, and then he uses that liquid as sort of a magic seeing spy camera.
Gross as well. It's like this worm is from a hatching of other worms, and those other worms are like burrowed into another rat's eyes or something like that. So he's seeing through this other rat's eye. There's it involved like getting parasitic worms into somebody else and then chewing up other ones, and it was suitably gross. Very
gross. He even says the process to insert the worm into somebody else's head is incredibly painful, so painful that the dude I stuck it in must have completely forgotten it. Like that's how it literally wiped its memory out of it, of the process, which is how he then can sort of see the goings on back in the assembly hall where the vote's being held. And so the count's being done. There's this Sexton General who's sort of a neutral Skaven, or as neutral as a Skaven can be, though. Pause and think. I saw no evidence of this Skaven not being neutral. The Sexton General, this Crassus, he seemed actually to be on the up and up as far as Skaven go. And so he's counting out the votes. And so it turns out that Radigan, although has the majority of the votes, he doesn't have I guess it's the word quorum. Does that fit to what we're doing here?
Yeah, I think he has a plurality, not a majority, if you're going to do it. So
sure, that works. To obviously Radigan's chagrin. Half-Scribble has a couple of votes to himself as well. And then there's this, and then Cruor got votes, even though he's not even present. And then finally, there's another leader who we really hadn't been introduced to yet. This Salvik Rakitich, and I think you have to draw out that R. I think that's important. Yeah, who hangs out in Akshi, which sort of colors his appearance. He's a little rusty, and he's got like a flaming censer around his neck, so that's pretty cool. They don't come to a decision because no individual got enough votes, and Hascribble calls out, "We need to do a recount," like everybody predicted. And in fact, I think someone earlier in the book predicted he specifically was going to be the one who needed to do a recount, or who would want a recount.
Yeah, there was a good reaction, him demanding a recount. Where it says, the priest groaned, the only collective action the Lyceum would ever knowingly undertake.
I forgot about that. That's good. Yep. And so they agree and they disassemble momentarily before they plan to circle back up and hold a recount. And so the scene breaks there. David, what happens next? Walk me through it.
So they're going back to kind of... they are going to regain their composure, get ready, like kind of try to collect up some more votes, or do whatever they do so that it's not the tie again, right? And they end up breaking out into some conflict here. Some of their
what Skaven?
Yeah. And so you have the numbers on the side of Hascribble, with the more elites on the side of Borkris, and then the sextants, I guess, come in these kind of big. I couldn't figure out what they were supposed to be. They seem like real big, muscular, sort of like if Pestilence had their own storm vermin or something like that coming. They break that up as well. Basically, an all-out brawl going on.
Yeah, so it's basically they're trying to whip up votes any way they know how, and by that I mean like beating each other up. And so Borkus's forces go after the Akshi forces to try and convince them to win them over, but then they're flanked behind them by Hascribble's forces, who come up out of nowhere, start smashing things up with a sensor bearer. Everyone's at each other's throats. They think if any one of them can kill any of the other leaders, they'll be able to steal their votes, and that'll give them the leg up in the vote that's about to come. So it's a wild free-for-all brawl. And I think, unfortunately, the Akshi guy gets dropped. After he stabs one of our guys in the back, he then is...
I think he gets a burning dagger into the lungs of Borkris. And he's like, lame. This is like burning away some of my infections. Like, I need those to live. Like he's now in like a symbiotic relationship with his own infections at this point. So yeah,
Borkus is able to turn himself around, and he breaks his jaw and distends it, and he shoots out a stream of like acid on him. Is what it was.
Yeah, that was gnarly.
Yeah, I think a lot of these Skaven, they end up pulling. They're not just physical beings. They have some power behind them. They have some tricks up their sleeve, whether it's a blade literally in their sleeve or the classic distend your jaw and shoot acid out of your mouth. Classic move. Everybody knows that one. You got to be prepared for that. But it's after this scuffle that they're able to reconvene in they call them the Lyceum. They're the Lyceum is the place? Yeah, Lyceum of the Lectors. And they're about to hold the vote while everyone is just, they've all seen better days, right? This apparently wasn't even the only scuffle. Apparently there were scuffles all throughout the clan, and they are all bedraggled and in rough shape as they're awaiting this vote to be recounted. However, there's one individual who isn't in rough shape. Apparently, he's actually very chipper. Who's that?
Is our man, the Kruor? Yeah, the verminable Kruor comes strolling in just like he planned it. He is arriving right on time, fashionably late, and he's ready to get this to happen. And he seems very confident. That's because he's got his own little plan here, and he has exposed everybody to a super awful plague, or has he? So there's all this. It felt very Princess Bride was the. If I think that I know that you would knowingly place the poison in front of you anyway. So
he fell for one of the classic blunders.
yeah, exactly. So he's got he's basically planning to just hold the whole Lyceum hostage. Say, hey, you got to vote for me. I know you will, because if you don't, then you're gonna die from this thing, and I'm the one who can turn it around. Borkris is like, nah, like this old guy's bluffing. He takes his head off, which I was maybe the most surprised I've been. I was like, oh, I thought Cror was going to be the dude. And then he's like, everyone's kind of startled, shocked. And Borkris is like, all right, we got that sorted out. Now let's, oh no, like starts coughing. Like, wait, I was wrong. And it turned out that Cror really had released this poison in there. And so the whole Lyceum starts gagging and choking, and it's a big gross fest in there.
Yeah. Everyone's shocked, mad, and then dead in that order. Yeah, so it turns out not nobody wins. In fact, we specifically find that not nobody wins, but all the nominees dropped dead. All of the sexton and all his followers dropped dead. And we then shift perspectives from the underlings, who are all sort of not allowed in the voting chamber, standing outside the door, like, what? They stopped talking. We can't hear anything. What's going on? What happened to them? And then they start jostling each other to be the one to have to go in and poke their nose in to see what happened. They're like, we're not allowed. It's against the rules. And we're like, well, you do it. No, you do it. No, you do it. And so our dude, who's got a name, Macklett Puss, who was the underdeacon to Radigan Borkis, he regrets that he was maybe one of the closer ones to the door, and he gets shoved in and chosen as the one who has to poke his nose. And he opens a door that should be locked, but it turns out the people who the rats in the side who were trying to flee for their lives unlocked it. They fall down. He pokes his nose in, sees everybody dead, and whether or not he smells something, it doesn't matter, because he knows when you open a door and you see that many dead Skaven, you close that door. And he slams it shut, rubs his face to get whatever it was out of his nose.
Believe the term he uses here is the diarrheal stench.
Yeah.
I've never seen diarrheal used as a adjective.
And it's rare that it's used even like in a Warhammer book. I feel like that specific word. Anyways, and so then they say, well, they look around. They say, what do we do now? And someone shouts out from the crowd, well, I nominate Malekith Puss as the new Archpustulent of Clan Morbidus. And it's funny because it comes back around, because earlier in the story, he was asking questions like, why would you ever choose this very exposed position? So it became clear that this is not something he ever dreamed of or ever wanted, which is also full circle, because throughout the story, you get the impression that the previous Archpustulent also didn't necessarily want the job. And so again, it seems like this position is, for as much as people are vying for it, it's just as likely it's going to get thrust on somebody who doesn't want it in the first place.
Right, exactly.
Which I also would not want it. I would find the deepest, darkest hole and hide in it. So that is the story, and what a story it is. Right on. Do you have any other thoughts or tidbits that you want to tease out that we hadn't touched on throughout it? Where are the notes? There they are.
No, only if we're gonna do some overview stuff. But there wasn't any more. I think we kind of touched on the specific notes that I marked. I just, there were a lot of little turns of phrase that were enjoyed, like we already talked about the exactly 13 breaths and all that sort of thing. There were just a lot of sort of fun throwaway lines throughout it, which made it steadily enjoyable, I would say.
Yeah. I mean, I think it was classically and quintessentially a Skaven story. It was a lot of what we were used to, and in a sense, a lot of being surprised, which we're also used to, which is kind of an oxymoron when dealing with Skaven, in that, like, you expect to be surprised when you're reading stories about them, which was tons of fun. I think one of the coolest parts of the book related to turns of phrases were the delightful titles that a lot of these folks had. I just want to rattle them off real quick, which are really neat. I really get the sense that these are self-styled or self-created titles. My wife's company, for a longest time, let you just come up with your own title and you can put it on a business card. So it's very, she doesn't realize, but it's very similar to Skaven. So Radigan Borkis was the malfeasant superior of the Church of the Gnawing Ruin. That's also a mouthful. His underling Malachipus was the underdeacon of the presbyotic wilt. Hascribble, like we said, was the first claw broken of the scratching ruin, and Dangi Cruor was the bilious sage of the extirpated way. Don't know what that means. And then there are other delightful ones like the Most High Supreme Matriarch of the Carrion Blights, the Pox Abbot of the Gurish Spreading, Lord Brewer of the Shriveling Pox, the Prost Warden of the Excremental Feast. That's particularly gross. And there's the Bile Master of the Church of the Scales of Pungence. And finally, the Praetor of the Foulsome Crucible. And that's only some of them. There's apparently 21 titles out there that we didn't get all of them. But listeners, I asked you to pick your favorite.
I got the sense that Guymer really had a fun time coming up with these. So
I think Guymer's at his best when he's having fun, right? Like his best stories are when you can tell that he's chuckling to himself. Because hey, guess what? I'm chuckling too.
Yeah.
So that was delightful. I also want to talk about the horn rat, but I think that'll be something I bring up when we learn something about the mortal realms that I didn't know. Other fun things was that spy camera was pretty neat with the worms, but pretty gross when we talked about that. But I think other than that, we covered a lot of the cool stuff in the story. So I'm going to ask some standard questions if you're ready for them. The fan favorite, or at least my favorite. Davy, who's your dude in this here tale?
So
rat tale.
I like to pick someone where maybe I just like them. Maybe I think they're cool. But often I like to pick someone where I can like kind of see myself in there, which is a challenging thing to do when you're talking about pestilence.
Yeah, me too.
But for me, it was Gagric.
Oh, okay.
Specifically for the moment where, because this happens in my family all the time, where he's talking to Cror. He's like, "Hey, shouldn't we get going? Like, aren't we? Don't want to make you mad, but aren't we already late?" And I was like, "Man, I've been there, trying to get the family out the door." And then he's actually the one right at the end who is like, "Hey, I nominate Macalit." I was like, "Yeah, quick on your feet, man."
Yeah, you gotta be. It's a survival of the fittest, and in this case, fittest is thinking quickly and surviving.
Yeah, I like that tiered where all the first in commands were brawling over who was going to go up the level, and all the second in commands were clearly in the right spots for themselves because they were like, not me, finger on the nose,
Nose goes. I was just going to say, you beat me to it. Along those same lines, I didn't think about Gagric. He's definitely up there, but similarly, I think my dude was, my gender neutral dude was Macalit Puss, the underdeacon, in that, reflecting on myself, oftentimes I get nominated for stuff that I do not want to do, and I just didn't get a chance to. I just wasn't thinking on my feet quick enough to get out of it. God, I just wish I could get out of stuff. And so I often think to myself, like, who would ever want that middle management position? Like, that sounds awful. Like, again, it's very in real life, very exposed. And so I can identify with all his perspectives or thoughts on things, and then when his shoulders slumped, my shoulders slumped at the end when I realized that, oh God, he's going to have to be the one to do it. Bummer. Let's put a pin in that because I want to circle back on that thought in a moment. But more questions. What did we learn about the mortal realms that we didn't know before? Did you learn anything about the mortal realms that you didn't know before?
Some of it was sort of a reminder of stuff I haven't seen in a while. Where we're talking about Blight City. I really find that interesting. The realm outside the realms idea, how that kind of fits in. It's a good AOSification of the role they played in the world that was, but then also kind of their relationship with the Great Horned Rat and the Corruptor. It was clearly at times they were, attributing their own sort of whatever their own desire. I'm going to do what I want to do. And then either saying that's what the Horned Rat would want anyway, or, like there'd be this sort of justification after the fact where like, what was it that, when, Hascribble was like getting into the fight, but he's at the back and like all his guys are getting killed and, he's really fired up, but man, his knees are real bad and makes it hard for him to like, and he's like, I got blessed with these bad knees so that I, didn't end up in that first wave. It was just, a lot of that. But they talk about it's a back and forth between self-justification for things, or giving themselves an excuse, but also like that's just kind of what the corruptor wants, and talking about the corruptor as an aspect of the horned rat, and how like other aspects of the horned rat might be jealous of the corruptor. So the word is poison and lies, for the lesser pieces of the horned rat are jealous of the corruptor, and so he plants seeds, lots many falsehoods in the minds of his faithful. So that was, I like that idea of kind of it feels very Skaven-y if their deity is kind of got multiple personality disorder up there. So
yeah, I mean, kind of like Nagash in that regard, and this is one of the few examples of like a mortal's interaction with their deity, where like we don't often see the deity walking around like on 2 feet like in the world, right? So
right.
There's not a lot of opportunity for mortals to like interpret what their god wants, because it's hard to interpret when he's they're looking you in the face and say do this or this, and so I think that's rare, right? To introduce your own interpretations as to what your god wants, because he's not present, or not regularly anyways. They would maybe debate that.
And I wonder if you'd see, I think you sometimes see a little bit more of that in, because a lot of times, like we're seeing, the obvious example is Sigmar or some such, and Sigmar interacting with his Eternals, the Stormcast, who do have this direct line to him, to Sigmar. But I think in like the more remote, I'm reading Dark Harvest now, and it's clear like there's people who are far enough separated from Sigmar where they're having to like kind of read between the lines a little bit. I think that the Skaven just have that almost at a baseline though, which is pretty cool. But I had that same shot. Like they had their relationship with their deity is a lot less direct. A lot more, like you said, interpret, cast the bones and read them.
Sure, yeah. Borkus Preened, the corruptor, bared his throat to him this day. I thought that was cool. Like, I don't know, what does that mean? I had learned that Skaven are into art, or at least some of them are. So in this big vestibule where they're casting the votes up in the ceiling, there's a big, I guess, like a fresco made from the blood or like the body fluids of the artist that his followers then painted a picture of all the other gods of like order being cast down, and the horned rat sort of becoming ascendant. This might be the first time that Skaven and art have ever been joined. I'm not sure. It's the first one for me. But I learned that about him.
I love that they attributed it was the masterpiece of the visionary Glotto. And you're like, Skaven art, like, but he didn't actually paint it. It's just his it's his inner fluids that were like used to finish it off. It's like gnarly. So
yeah, gross. Those are the standard questions. Do you have any other questions before I do other book recommendations?
Oh, I think that was solid.
Okay. You brought up Hamilcar before. We didn't talk about Skaven Pestilence, right? Because I think that's the only other true book that I can think of that really touches on this subfaction of Skaven, and that's by Josh Reynolds. Kind of mangled the segue there, but so that's one recommendation, that if folks can't get enough of their scabby, pussy Ratmen, go there next. But then
fun because they're hanging out on the moving city, like the worm city.
Oh, Shugal or what have you. I never actually read it, but I know about it. Yeah. And then this is the thing I was putting a pin in. There's a sequel. Davey, did you know to this story?
Not. This is amazing.
Yeah, it just came out in the most recent Inferno 6. This story actually started out, I think, as an Inferno one, but then they released it as just by itself. But the sequel is The Nefarious Antipustulent of Clan Morbidus by David Guymer. Currently in Inferno, I think it's 6. Oh God, I hope I'm not wrong. I have to look because this is going to be...
I did look. It is Inferno 6 because when I saw this in your notes, I was like, no way, this has got to be a joke. Like, and then I looked at it for a little while longer. I'm like, I bet you this really is something. And it turns out when you Google Nefarious Antipustulent, there's not a lot of hits.
And if I haven't read it yet. I intentionally didn't read it until after we did this story because I didn't want to ruin anything for myself or you, or the listeners. But I think it does follow Mac. Well, God, what's his name? Macklemore. You know, Macklett Puss. I gotta double check. Right? Does it? Yeah, I think it does. So I might hang up this call and then go proceed to read it immediately. So, dear listeners, let's read this together. You want to give me a review? What do you think about the story as a whole? It sounds like we're speaking highly of it, but prove it.
It was delightful. It was so not my faction that I say like this is what I want to know more about. But it was just right that sort of short story hit for me. So I'll go 17 out of 21 scratch votes.
Oh, I didn't think about the score. Oh, that's the one thing I didn't prep for. Okay.
But yeah, there was fun turns of phrase. There was some enjoyable twists, and I learned a little bit about one of the factions in the game I like. The game I like.
Right on. I echo a lot of what you said. Since it's been like over a year since we did one of these, I feel comfortable in using the age-old trope of, I think Age of Sigmar fiction is at its best when it's in short story form. That's normally a Davy go-to, but I agree with it. And that this was perfectly paced, I think. Did not overstay its welcome. It was a roller coaster ride in its condensed state. We got a lot of interesting characters that we didn't have to like belabor any of their character points. Like they had the things that they did and that they did well, and they stood out. And so I enjoyed following their machinations towards the throne or crown or whatever the term is for the Archpustulency. So I did enjoy it. It was funny. David Guymer books often are, if not even, maybe even always are, maybe. And so because of that, I do recommend it. And the fact that there's a sequel also just guarantees that I was going to read it, because man, do I love my continuity.
Yeah.
Can't get enough of that. So I think it was awesome. Probably one of the better short stories that we read on these here these here pocket casts or pocket realms. You're gonna get it right. Unless there's any final thoughts, we can wrap it up.
I think we can do it. All
right, let's do it. It's time for our reforging. Chat with us anytime about your thoughts on Twitter at The Mortal Realms. Davey, where can they find you online?
I'm at red_Zeke on Twitter. And then you can always find us in the What the Hex podcast.
Nice. I'm Aaron. You can find me at Dos Asos on Twitter. And obviously, if you're listening to this, you're definitely listening to the Story Phase as well. And you can find all our Mortal Realms shows and content at www.themortalrealms.com.
And come chat with us on our Discord, because there's a lot of cool people there.
Cool people. A lot. Agreed. The end. Cool. That wasn't that bad.
Good stuff.
Which is what you want to hear after you just did it. That wasn't that bad.
That wasn't that bad.
Yeah. Hey, everybody. Pocket Realms is back. I'll make this quick. We're doing well. We're hoping you're doing well, too. Pocket Realms, for those of you who don't know, are mini story phases that Davey and I do on AOS short stories for our Free Guild Patreon subscribers. They're super cool. And eventually we get enough of them saved up that I package a few into a larger episode, which is this, and release it to all Mortal Realms followers, which is you. But that's just when I get around to it. If, however, you do not want to wait for me to get around to it, I suggest you head on over to themortalrealms.com/Patreon or patreon.com/themortalrealms. Join at the Free Guild level, and then you can listen to the episodes as soon as I churn them out. And I do mean churn because they're smooth like butter. In fact, there's a new one out there right now, Skull Throne by Jake Ozga. Go check it out. All right, but that's all I got. Enjoy the rest of these here Pocket Realms. See ya. Welcome to the Pocket Realms, a Mortal Realms short story phase. Grab your hammer so we can clear a path through the chaos and forge our own narratives in the Age of Sigmar. Your allies through the realm gates this episode are...
I'm Davy, and after reading this story, I thought it'd be good to talk about imposter syndrome, but I just don't think I'm cut out for it.
And I'm Aaron, and where is your elf tonight? I hope he is a Lumineth. And today... we're going to talk about The Spears of Autumn by Richard, I don't ever know how to say his last name, Strachan, which is odd because I listened to an interview with him not too long ago, and I'm like, oh, that's how he says it. I'm going to remember that. And I did, and I never will. but we'll get to that in a minute. In the meantime, hey, Davey, how are you?
I'm doing pretty well. I have been productive already. We're recording in the morning, and I've already got dinner cooked. It's simmering away. And so it's just free time from here on out. Do whatever I will. And what I will is record video.
You and me both. Excellent and awesome. I am dandy as well. And at least for this, at the moment of recording, I am well rested, which is a rarity these days. But don't worry, the audience, I'm putting the coffee in me right now. You get ready for the full Aaron effect. Any minute now, I can feel it coming. Before we jump into our little story phase, I can call it that. That's not diminutive.
It's literally diminutive, but
well, it's different strokes for different folks. Let's check in. It's been a while since we've chatted with each other. At least you and I have chatted. What have you been up to? What's some hobby you've done, or games you've played, or books that you've read?
Well, hobby-wise, we got our review copy of Harrow Deep, so I assembled the Cruel Boys out of there. The boss of that warband is insane. He goes together with a cage over his head.
I was going to ask, yeah.
I want to finish assembling this because I like to spray prime, but there's no way I can reach through his cage and paint his face, so I've been pondering exactly how to go about doing that piece.
Is it in such a way that, because they're all easy, they're like push to fit, is there a way you can push to fit it, then unpush to fit it?
You found my potential solution here.
Gotcha. It's
a little tricky because there's the pieces are delicate enough that you have to be gentle when pushing to fit, so to speak.
Hobby master Aaron finds all the sweet tricks.
Reading wise, we're doing The Goblin Emperor for our book club, which is challenging from a glossary perspective. It
is real tricky.
I know all words are made up as per Thor, but it's a little bit of a lot of work, I was going to say. And then I'm reading. I really like Michael Chabon and reading one of his short story collections called A Model World.
Appropriate because you're in your model room. You were just telling me.
Yeah.
How apt.
One day it'll be a world. It's a world to me.
Neat. Let's think. So what am I working on? It's hard to hobby when you have a baby strapped to you. But when I get a chance, I've been assembling my Nurgle stuff. That's a little bit of a change of pace. It's been a while, so I feel like I've gotten through a fair bit of it. Now we're doing the vegetables of the meal, which is to say I have to put the plate bearers together, and I'm not super stoked about that. But we'll knock that out of the way. We'll do some plague drones, and I think I'll have all my Nurgle stuff assembled, which will be nice. I haven't really played any games, but as far as books go, like you said, reading the Goblin. What was it? I already figured it was called Goblin King.
Emperor,
Goblin Emperor. I shouldn't sell him short. And reading the Stormcast Battle Tome, because we're going to do an episode on that in just a matter of days. So for you listeners, that you can try and place this episode when we recorded it in the midst of other ones. Thank you, by the way.
Big bulletin board of with red string and line and my headshots.
Hair all askew. Now's a great time to bring up. Hey, Davey, thanks for doing the with the rest of the team for doing the Warclans Battle Tome. Now it's recorded. Now there's an official evidence of me thanking you.
Sure,
I appreciate it. I just finished listening to it the other day. So get this, I'm not going to read it. I listened to the episode. I'm all caught up. Yeah.
It's been fun to be on that side of things after seeing both sides of it, having been on there, recording all of them and then listening to them and then coming back to recording some of them. So it gives you that perspective of both sides of it. So
and Paul, I'm just kidding when I say this is just a joke, but then like to hear some of Paul's theories and not be able to like respond in any way. And what are you talking about? No,
just begging one of the other hosts to be like, come on, like
stop that man. Yeah. Please. Just kidding. JK. TM. All right. I think we're all caught up. Everybody's got a glimpse into our lives. This terrible existence that we call our lives. Let's jump into the little story phase.
Yeah. The story phase. In the story phase, we delve into the stories, characters, creatures, and environments of the 9 realms.
This is normally where I would put in a little blurb about, or that I steal from the website, except this story, The Spears of Autumn, is actually taken from the Thunderstrike and Other Stories, I don't know, compilation or whatever you want to call those things. And because of that, it doesn't have a little blurb. So you guys are going to go in blind. Just kidding. We're going to catch you. We're going to catch you all up. But yeah, as I just mentioned, we're going to be talking about The Spears of Autumn by Richard Strachan, which I am becoming a huge fan of this guy, this author. I'm really liking a lot of the things that he's written up. He did The Warcry, Catacombs, Blood of the Everchosen, something of the Everchosen. Yeah. But that was really good. And a few others that I think we'll pepper in to this. Actually, he also wrote the titular Thunderstrike story for this compilation. In fact, so it's a little novella at the top, and that was also really good. So I also highly recommend that one. But that is not what we're talking about. We're going to talk about The Spears of Autumn. So let's do our spoiler-free section as we always do. And first question, I guess it counts as a W question because it's why. But why are we reading this book? I've got my thoughts, but Davey, why do you think we picked it up?
Well, you kind of laid out here's some suggestions, and I said, hey, that one looks like a Wanderer story. We haven't seen much about that. Let's do that. And then you said, JK, it's not a Wanderer story.
Close, but not really.
Yeah. But then you had a selling point on it. You said this is a prequel to The End of Enlightenment, a book that you've already read and enjoyed. I was like, well, that's good enough. So.
Yeah. Well, I too thought it was a Wanderer story. Spears of Autumn sounds like a Kurnoff type deal, maybe a little bit of Orion peppered in, but obviously not the case. But I was pleasantly surprised to find out that it is sort of a prequel to that End of Enlightenment, which is a Lumineth Realm Lords novel by Richard Strachan. And that was really great, and I really enjoyed it. And well, I'll explain maybe why I thought this was a great relation to that story as we move on. But so those are good enough reasons for me. Hopefully, listeners, they're good enough reasons for you. But since it's a prequel to this novel I'm talking about, when does this story take place?
Yeah. So you can place this better than I can. What I picked up from this is that it is definitely during/after some of the events of Broken Realms. So they speak explicitly about going into Shyish. For me, it wasn't quite clear just because I'm not as knowledgeable about it. But it seems like you've got it pinned down a little tighter based on what you've jotted down.
Yeah. So it helps having read the novel, right? Well, and also I guess doing an episode on Broken Realms tech list. But so there's a few sort of major events that occur in Broken Realms Teclis. The first one being, well, I mean, broadly, is that like Teclis sort of invades Shyish with his forces because he's fed up with what Nagash is being up, or has, what he's been up to. And so they invade. It's a campaign of harrying, Nagash's forces in Shyish. It's an inspirational move, yada, 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 but they eventually leave. And so this story takes place after that. So the campaigns have sort of already occurred in Shyish, and a lot of the Lumineth are returning home. And this story and other stories sort of focus on like the ramifications of that, how the Lumineth feel about that, essentially, and their reactions to, having to return home, and then facing down the potential threat of Nagash returning the favor, so to speak, which is harrowing time to be sure. I feel like I used harrowing already. Can't use it twice. So that's essentially where this story takes place. It's nice to have a specific timeline and a fairly recent time frame for these stories, because it really sort of cements you, puts you in sort of in the shoes of the characters as they're, reacting to major events, which I love. I feel like I talk about that a lot. But moving on, let's hop into Aware. I feel like I already talked about it a little bit, but I'll just keep going on. So this particular story is going to be taking place in the Ymetrica region, continent. I guess I don't know what the term is for what this is in Hysh. And so, like I said, it's these Lumineth returning home from the campaign and preparing for, the worst, essentially. So it's I don't know, not super common that we get stories in Hish, though I feel like now we're getting more and more of them as time gets on. But it goes on, so it's an opportunity to get maybe a different environment in Hish that we hadn't seen before, which was delightful. Davey, you had mentioned you haven't read a lot of Lumineth books. Does the setting do anything for you here?
I enjoyed it because specifically because that it kind of prompted me to do, like, I had brought up a map of Hish to take a look because I didn't have a good map of it. They mentioned Zintil a few times, or Shintil. I don't know how you say that with the X, Intil.
I'm the last person to ask.
Yeah. Well, there's only one other person, so you're the first and last.
That's nice of you to say.
So knowing that some of these characters are from that region, the center of Hish, where humans also live in more numbers than elsewhere in the realm, was educational for me. And there were just, some of the little tidbits that they dropped that either didn't know or had forgotten about. True Night never fell in Hish, for instance. Like, oh yeah, that makes sense. The realm of light. Like, I like those little touches that remind you that you're in a particular realm instead of generic fantasy place.
Yeah, it makes me think of just if you're in a particularly northern hemisphere, like at certain times of year, it never really gets dark, or like it's only dark for moments, right? So same vibe. And then let's talk about some who's. So trying to debate how to do the who. Do I name the guy that is from the novel? I'm going to do it. Who even listens to these things, it doesn't matter. So we are, at least in some small part, rejoined with a character named Belfinnin, who is a Dawn Rider Steed Master. So a Lumineth cavalry dude. So he's leading his 500 strong cavalry across Hish, so to speak, and we get his sort of perspective, and then we get another perspective with one of his, not underlings. I'm not a military guy. One of his troops. That's a word that between the two of them covers this short story. But it's a perspective again that, given that Lumineth are relatively new, that we don't get a lot of Lumineth insight, or we haven't had a lot of Lumineth insights so far. And like a lot of the big stories, sort of campaign wise, we're following Teclis, right? Like the top of the pyramid, so to speak, or the ladder, I guess, so to speak. So this is an opportunity to get some of the viewpoints of, far lower on the rungs of Lumineth. Mm-hmm. Do you have any other who thoughts?
Yeah, there's a Cephalus, I guess. Cephalus.
Let's call him Ceph. Yeah.
Ceph. All right. This young rider in his company kind of acts as a foil for some of the exposition that we get, I suppose. But he's almost the only other character in here. Certainly the only character that has more than one speaking line. Mm-hmm. If you particularly if you count his internal monologue.
And I do.
And you have to. So those two kind of make the 2 points of this story.
Yeah. And then I guess finally, that brings us to our what. Is there any what's that we're missing? I feel like we jumped on a lot of it.
No, I think we've got that pretty well covered here.
Yeah. Prequel story. All right. So enough of the spoiler-free stuff. Enough of the dancing. Let's get right into full spoilers. All the spoilers all the time. Starting right now. You guys didn't see, but I did a hand shop motion. All right. So, the Spears of Autumn. The camera opens up on Belfinnin, and he is I think Steedmaster is the word for like the leader of the Dawn Riders. He's got like 500 troops at his back, standing on some ridge. It's all very picturesque in Hish, and they see off in the distance there's this big woods, and he's got a second in command. That person has a name. I wrote it down. Bethan. Which is just, I think it's just Beth. I'm sure she goes by Beth. And she says, sir, we can't go through these woods. We got to go around it. But for you folks who know Belfinnin, man, this is going to be rough. He's not going to go around nothing. And he stares it down and he says, we've got a place to be, and we're going to get there straight through this here woods.
Mm-hmm.
So that's the setting. Maybe we need a little, or I guess we find out through this conversation a little bit of background about what's actually going on here.
These woods are kind of the home of restless spirits, I guess. Some lumineth from the fall, right? How do they call it? The fall here?
Yeah, Okari Dara.
That is the term for
the fall.
The fall.
Oh, wait, okay. Did you mean the season fall, or did you mean the fall of the Lumineth?
Whoa, connection. Oh, I meant the fall of the Lumineth.
Okay, gotcha. Yeah.
Yeah. So, and it's got a ominous reputation, haunted by spirits. And so this is a gamble for our commander, right? Like he's I need to get there sooner rather than later, but he's got a whole bunch of untested in his ranks. Not all of us have the hearts of veterans. Warren's is second. We lost many in Shaish, and the new recruits are untried. So going through here with unseasoned soldiers, you may shake them even more, or it may toughen them up. Having gone through a trial of some kind. So here is, he probably knows it's something of a calculated risk that he's taking by going through here.
Yeah, but when we're talking about calculated risks, I feel like that is probably Belfinen's MO, because as we find out, throughout the story, and again from the novel that we read previously, he's actually he's kind of a hero type character. His bravery precedes him, so to speak. He did grand things in the campaign in Shaish against Nagash's forces, and so he's never been one to sort of shy away from a challenge. And furthermore, what maybe is driving his decision, or driving him to this sort of maybe a brass decision, is because he knows that he needs to go get his 500 strong unit to the Holy Mountain in Ymetrica, because this stone mage has called all aid to him, basically to sort of shore up their defenses there. And so he knows that time is of the essence, and they need to get to the aid of this stone temple in order to prepare defenses and get ready for any sort of retaliation that may come from Nagash. Spoiler alert, it's coming. He's right. He's not wrong. So because of this, it's sort of driving already sort of rash individual to sort of see where he can cut his corners to get there all the quicker.
Yeah, when we leave his perspective here, he notes one of his riders looking. He's like, that guy there, and he's on the edge of breaking. He can see in the way that rider bears himself that there's some doubt there. But his statement right before it cuts away to another perspective is, "Let us fear no darkness before darkness itself veils our eyes, for there is plenty of time for caution when we're dead." Well, all right, true, I guess. Maybe more true in the mortal realms than elsewhere, but like, ooh, yeah, that's one way to think about it. So
I mean, yeah, I feel like that only is true in the mortal realms. In that, like, when I die, there's no need. But if you're getting kicked out into some sort of underworld, yeah, I suppose you do need to be especially cautious. Wise words from Belfin. Well, I mean, we find out later he's a poet too, so like that makes sense. He's got his way with his words. So, like you said, the scene does shift perspectives to, as far as I know, that same rider that he notes, is got a little bit of fear behind his eyes, and we hop behind those eyes to Seth, to his friends, and I think we're friends now after reading a story about him. Best
with
pals.
This transition here, obviously we're struggling with the name some, and I always kind of do that with elven names in this sort of fiction. And what I realize I must do is that I start reading them like, I'm not sure how to pronounce that, and I kind of like blur over it. What that means is that when I encounter the names again, I was like, wait, is this one that I know or not? And so when it shifted, I was like, I had to say exactly that. I was like, wait, is this a guy I've already been introduced to? And I had to like flip back, like, oh no, this is somebody new. Reread that previous paragraph. I'm like, oh, I bet you were got the perspective of the one who was looking somewhat fearful.
So we're in. We drop an in media res between the conversation between two of these writers, Seth and his good friend Diffeth, but we're going to call him Diff because that's what his friends call him. And they, we learn a little bit about the two of them and that they're relatively new to the scene, to the Dawn Rider scene. They've sort of just recently been recruited from. We know at least Seth was like a farmer's kid, and they were conscripted or just recruited, or maybe I guess at one point it says he always dreamed about being a Dawn Rider, so maybe he volunteered. So they have just recently joined this unit to sort of fill or like reinforce, maybe the losses from Shyish. And so they're sort of chatting back and forth as two new recruits probably do, sort of talking about, different, gabbing about like the legends of some of the folks that are leading them, or talking about, future glories, yada, yada, yada. But as they're sort of just, discussing their place in this unit, it becomes clear that Seth is starting to have some doubts about whether he even belongs here in the first place, the dangers ahead of them, knowing that like Nagash is probably breathing down your neck a little bit. And it really sets the stage to get sort of into Seth's perspective and realizing sort of the fear that's creeping into him. And of course, it doesn't help that they're in this spooky haunted forest where he's getting whispers of, spectral faces behind trees and stuff. They're sort of just egging on his, maybe not paranoia, but feelings of unease, to say it lightly. And it's getting to him. How did this scene strike you, Davy?
It was, I enjoyed getting a little backstory, the idea of I actually, part of the reason why I did sign off on, let's do this thing, is I don't know a ton about the Lumineth. It's not a faction historically that has interested me. I'm like, you know what? We get a lot of listeners, a lot of people interact on our Discord that are all about them. And I was like, those are cool folks. I should get myself a little more knowledgeable. And so it was, I liked getting a little bit of their background, a little bit of their dialogue. I think also, and I'll return to this a little bit, but the author doesn't write them quite as, ethereal is not the word I'm looking for. Not as like kind of absurdly formal as I sometimes encounter elves in fantasy fiction, so I guess they were more relatable, just with this interaction. So that kind of warmed me to whatever story was going to be coming down the wire from this. So
so much time is spent in the Battletome where they talk about how the Lumineth are like the greatest artisans, and like they're all about perfect music and jewelry and magical items, and they're mastering the winds of magic, and they're climbing this Teklian ladder. But so very little time is spent in those sort of top-down official-esque lore background materials about like what's the bottom of the ladder look like? Are there not farmers? Is a question I feel like we go back to a lot in the Age of Sigmar, and so this is a great glimpse into what it is to be at the bottom, I guess, of the Lumineth, so to speak. And even at the bottom, the guy's got he's still got like his fancy helmet and his fancy armor and stuff. He even talks about, he's like, I don't know that I belong in any of this stuff, but like, the point is it's still pretty, I don't know if decadent's the word, but ornate or impressive. So even their lowest have some impressiveness to them, but it's a glimpse into sort of that perspective that we haven't gotten a lot of, and we probably won't get a lot of going forward. And so that was nice. And you talk about like they aren't overly fancy. Yeah, I imagine when you are at the bottom of the ladder, so to speak, you don't speak with all this flowery language. I mean, he's a farmer's kid. Like he's not speaking in the poetry that that we've already seen a little bit from the head honcho. I'm avoiding trying to say names. Belfinin. We had sort of touched on it before, but the reason we're seeing all these spooky spirits and whispers and stuff is the idea that this particular forest was a place of like innovation back in the Age of Myth, where the Lumineth were performing great experiments and mastering great magics and yada yada yada. There was the Karidara that we talked about. There was the Fall, and so this place is now being sort of haunted. Is what the elves are able to gather. They're sort of haunted by like the spirits of those that fell here, and so they have a particularly malicious streak in them.
Yeah, these ones in particular, they were researching the healing arts, and that progressed on to, well, like, let's better understand it by understanding pain, like what causes pain, but then
Classic.
involved. Yeah.
We've all done that.
Has like a 40K Drukari vibe, right? Like, because they progressed onto torture and nastiness like that.
Excuse me, Davy. I heard. By the way, I heard what you said on the Orca episode. I can't remember what it was, but it was a specific. We can say this because Aaron's not here. Thanks a lot. Get it out of your system. All right. So then the scene shifts. There's no chapters, but like it's kind of broken up into little sections here. Fast forward a little bit. The troop, I don't know, makes camp, and so everybody sort of goes their separate ways and sets up their fires and beds down for the quote unquote night. Davey, you had mentioned that it's never really like true night here because it's hish and it's always essentially lit up. And so Seth finds himself sort of off finds himself by himself with his horse, Tuiselen. That's a cool name. That's a cool horse name. It's no Shadowfax, but it'll do. And I think he's in trouble now, right? Like when he's by himself, he's really left to his own inner thoughts and the thoughts of those, spooky whispers out in the forest. And this is where I think he really starts to despair. Shouldn't be here. He's just going to die. Like his dad needs help with the farm work. So like, I'm sorry guys, like I would stay, but my dad needs help with the farm work. And so he as he's falling asleep, he sees everyone else, it seems like in a good mood. He doesn't understand why, like he can't feel that way too.
I think bringing his dad into it was a good touch by the author. I think, and who knows how it works for effectively, like, well, for particularly long-lived race like the elves, but this guy is certainly coded as like a young man, right? And there's this thing where like it's difficult to contemplate your own mortality. Like, it's you often think that the bad things will happen to somebody else, right? Like. That's why you end up with these young folks more likely to take risks on, whatever it is in our world, like riding a motorcycle fast or without a helmet or whatever the case may be.
It's so cool though.
Where it gets to him is thinking of the impact on like the people that matter to him. So thinking about like how his father will feel when he learns of his death, or thinking of like the particularly gruesome things like having his bones harvested by the Ossiarch Bone Reapers on some battlefield. So those are the pieces of his doubts that rang particularly true for me. That I thought was a good bit of writing there.
Yeah, and all the while the voices are egging him on, so like they can tap into his inner thoughts in some way and are telling him what it sounds like he already wants to hear. And so although he I think makes to fall asleep. I don't know. I think maybe he sleeps but then gets back up. I can't remember, but it doesn't matter. So I think he gets closer and closer to the decision that he's gonna book it. He's gonna boogie on out of here. He's got better places to be. So the camp falls asleep. Seth, I guess, bides his time or picks an opportunity to slink away when no one will know. He's convinced that he's going to be able to get out of camp without anybody catching him. So he packs up his S-word and hops on his horse and moseys on. He hits the dusty trail, I think is an appropriate horse-based image, and heads back the way they came. Sort of again with the whispers encouraging him. But as he makes his way down the path, a little bit down the road, who does he stumble upon? But our boy Belfin. I feel like there should be more vowels in there. Belfin, who's sitting on a log, whittling a stick, looking cool AF. And Seth is obviously taken aback. He knows he's caught, and so he tries to stammer out an excuse. But it doesn't matter. Belfin knows. He knows what's up, and they have a nice little heart to heart. Seth admits that he's terrified. He doesn't belong here. I gotta leave. I'm gonna. This was a bad decision. This is a bad choice. And Belfin says, "Hey, look, man. Don't worry about being." As I paraphrase, "Hey, man, don't worry about being afraid."
Hey, man.
you know my legend, don't you? And Seth is like, well, yeah, of course, you're Belfin the Brave. You turned some big battle with your counter charge, and you chopped fools up, and you earned a great your great title because of your valiant efforts.
This comes up specifically because he says, look, of course you're afraid. Everyone here is afraid. And Seth is like, well, obviously not you. It's there in your name. You're Belfin the Brave. You won the field at the Shadrian Crisis, which I did a little bit of looking. I couldn't see if that was a thing we knew about.
I hadn't heard of it, but I didn't even look. I should have looked.
And he's like, you were younger than I was, and you basically single-handedly won the day on that. And Belfin is like, well, let me tell you. Let me paint you a picture of
flashback.
Yeah, and so then we transition. We have another sort of little jump here. Previously, it was point of view, and now we're just going back to him telling the tale of the Shadrian Crisis. Well, so one thing of note here: this is they are fighting. They're fighting the Godseekers. He talks. The Godseekers fought like demons, although they were no more than elves and men. And I was like, elves. Tell me more. Show me more. You periodically, I think there's somebody just on our Discord maybe today asking, what factions have elves who have fallen to chaos, and they were like, well, there's the Splintered Fang has that one figure, but they're few and far between in representation as far as on there. And this is clearly a story that is a little bit of a struggle for Belfin, and it's not a great memory for him. He says, do you want to know the legend or do you want to know the truth? And that's how he launches into this. So he's talking about fighting these Godseekers, and says that, saying just how terrible the enemy was at this, and how it was a horrifying sight. And their Lord Aquilith fell, and they were thrown into confusion. Their front line collapsed. He's off on the left, and he could see everything being a falter. And Seth is like, well, what did you do? And he says, I felt ashamed. I turned and then I ran. That was, it's a kind of a shocking admission for that. So this Belfin the Brave, I turned and ran. Most of us did. And then he looked back and he can see his friend still riding hard towards the enemy. And it's that moment that he feels ashamed. And it wasn't that he felt ashamed because, he was already, struggling with some of those feelings as far as running, but it's seeing his comrade still pushing forward is what convinced him to turn around and go back. And then his act, it's this kind of cascading thing in the same way that panic can flood through a battle line. That act of him turning around, somebody else sees him, and another one sees that, and another sees that, and they all turn and charge again. And it's as they return, they're able to kind of charge anew and win the day. And part of what must be making this memory difficult for him is that that friend that he saw that kind of inspired him to return died on that day. He wasn't, he wasn't one of the heroes of the Luminet. It was just one more soldier. And so he says, he died, cut down by a Godseeker's blade, unheralded, unwarned by any except me. It seems a little like nobody else noticed this person, but I get what he's getting at. Like he felt that loss pretty acutely, and he uses that to say, look, like fear got the better of me once, but it's you do your duty, and you do it for the elves to your left and your right, if nothing else. Like that's what you can do, and it's not bad to be afraid. You just have to be able to manage that. So that's kind of his pep talk based on his the truth behind a legend that really his soldiers are in awe of.
Yeah. And the pep talk works, so it convinces Seth to return, and so the scene sort of ends there. But we pick back up as the cavalry unit sort of reaches the end of the forest. They've braved the dangers of the Blessed Wood, and they sort of are able to sort of stare across the expanse ahead of them and see the holy mountain Ulferodon off in the distance, and they know, all right, well, that's our destination is there, so Seth basically is prepared to, face down any dangers that they have ahead of them, knowing that like his goal is to be there for his allies, his friends in the unit. So that's what is able to convince him to put on a brave face. And then Belfin has he's back to his old, because while telling his story, he gets kind of sort of sullen and crestfallen, but he's back to his old bravado self, and leads his forces onwards. I don't know if there's a trumpet, but I feel like there should be a trumpet there.
I think one small connection I saw there is the idea of this of the heroic commander being part, what that person actually is or does or how they are, but also part performance, right? Like he's able to kind of flip this switch, similar to, and instead we get the internal monologue a lot of your boy Hamilcar, right? Like Hamilcar has all this bravado, but also some of it is for show that we, when we're reading about him, is like, well, I need to be this big, he's got some internal doubts, but he never shows them externally, in those moments where he needs to be the, roaring, bellicose, war leader, so this is kind of a theme that we've seen, before with some of those Stormcast stories, which I enjoyed.
Yeah, and I think it's easy to fall into the trap of making your big, larger than life, general type characters as always sure of themselves. But obviously, what makes a good character is having a little more depth than that, and this is why I like Belfin and more. And in fact, I liked him before he was cool. No, I liked him in the novel before you knew any of this, right? He was just that larger than life, big personality. And then to have, and I'm kind of jumping ahead, this is more of an in-depth thought, but then to have this short story to prove that, no, he's more than that. I think it adds that third dimension, maybe fourth dimension, I don't know, to this character that makes him all that more appealing. But we can talk more about characters in a second. Mainly, well, I guess before I hop into who was your favorite character, do you have any other thoughts about the story that you want to chat about before we get into some standardized questions?
No, we can go to standardized. I'll see what comes up and maybe circle back with some other thoughts here.
Great idea. Hey, Davy, who was your person?
There's not a lot of choices to pick from. I usually like to kind of go with the deep cut here.
I know. And what is the deep cut even for this?
No, you're right. Exactly. I maybe you found one. But for me, I either, the deep cut or just someone that I can kind of see some of that in. And one of my previous careers, I was an officer in the U.S. military, and this idea of like, for that, you kind of come in, you've got just a little bit of training, or a lot, but sometimes it feels like not much. And then you're put in this position, with a lot of responsibility. And so that's a lot of what Seth is struggling with. He's not an officer in this case, but he has a lot of responsibilities. And so his doubts where he's like, man, like I am, I'm just got here. I have a little, just a little bit of training. Now I've got to be doing these big things. Like that kind of, I mentioned at the beginning, this idea of the imposter syndrome, like, well, I'm not really supposed to be here. Like working through those doubts is like kind of a big thing of finding your place in this sort of an organization. And so, maybe not, explicitly like all the things he was thinking, but some of those feelings is like, yeah, I got you. Hit me a little bit there. So, I'll pick Seth.
In terms of possible deep cuts, I thought maybe you might drift towards Amaris, which was Belfin's friend who died and led the charge. In that, what do we know about him, right? That he led a charge by himself against. So I mean, maybe that's not the most like relatable characteristic, because that's a huge bravery, and I'm not that brave, so I don't see myself in that. Yeah, in him at all. But like, what little we know about him, seems like a great dude, willing to sort of sacrifice himself and sort of lead that, if not suicidal, it ended up being so, charge. And then him not even knowing that he turned the tide through his actions, through his like last ditch charge, he ended up, turning the tide of the battle. It seems important. However, that's not my guy. My guy is definitely Belfinen, because he's the best. I love that guy. And it's not fair because I feel like I have seen more of him in the novel, which I do recommend folks reading. And he is very much a Hamilcar-esque character. And obviously I love Hamilcar.
Well, I made that connection without having read the next one.
Very much is. I imagine the difficulty in trying to write Lumineth characters without them sort of all being the same. Like, how do you insert different characteristics and make them unique, and also have them in some ways try to separate them a little bit from what like the High Elves are from the Old World. I didn't read a lot of Old World stuff, and I didn't spend a lot of time with those characters. But from what little I've done with Teclis and Tyrion and those names. How do you try and differentiate and then also make your Lumineth characters unique? And although I see a lot of Hamilcar in Belfinen, it's sort of with a elf facade, or it's Hamilcar in an elf costume, which I don't begrudge. And he's got his own unique takes as well. Like the dude's a poet. No one's ever called Hamilcar a poet. Like he wants to recite songs, and he's writing poetry and singing songs that everybody else is groaning about. So that's also as there's a point in my book for that. So maybe he's not very good at it, which is awesome. I'm not good at a lot of stuff. And so because of that, I do like spending time with him. And then it just cemented how much I liked him, the story, knowing that he's got that sort of, vulnerable side, that it comes from, a place of, like a wound from his past, so to speak. And we never really saw his perspective in the novel. Like, I don't know that he was ever the point of view. And so from even though I liked him as a third person character, I like him all the more knowing that I can, knowing what I know about him in his own brain. And like, in some ways, not always, but in some ways he is kind of full of shoot. I mean, and I had one other thought. Oh, just that we're talking about how he turned around to try and charge with his friend, back historically. There was a certain element of like he was ashamed, and he saw the bravery in his friend and like it instilled bravery to him. But like another part of it was he felt bad because he didn't want his friend to die alone. So it's not even that it's not only the bravery, but it was he's going to die. I'm probably going to die too. We should at least die next to each other. Like, I don't want to be over here and him over there. Like, I literally want to be at his side while we die. And so that is kind of a different type of bravery. It's not like, oh, we're going to win the day. It's literally, if I'm going to die, I'm just going to do it over there, with my pal, which was more of a camaraderie, in some ways more of a camaraderie thing, as opposed to like a bravery thing, which I thought was neat. And so that really drove the point home where he's talking about, you got to do it for your friends. It's not, don't do it for your, country. Don't do it for, what have you. It's for the, it's the connections of the, like you said, to your left and to your right, which is great. So long answer for a short question. Belfinen's my guy. I want to see him and Hamilcar hang out. They'll be best buds, I'm sure of it, or they would hate each other. Either way, good story. Let's check it out. Because then I'm going to ask you, did you learn anything about the mortal realms that you didn't know before?
Yeah, I mean, for me, some was, and I maybe relearning a thing that I had known. The thing about the light in Hish, that thing. Just a little bit more about the spire fall or whatever, when the little bit fleshing out some of the back of that was good for me. So not big world shaking things, but making a realm I don't know as much about feel a little more lived in. I appreciate that. Yeah,
along those same lines. The reason it's called Spears of Autumn is because this apparently is taking place in autumn, in fall, and that was sort of news to me. In that. Not that I thought it was impossible that there would be seasons in Hish, but like it's something I hadn't really thought about. But like you would think in a realm that's always light all the time, I guess that doesn't matter. So seasons are dependent on which way your planet's tilting towards the sun, which you wouldn't think any of that would apply to a mortal realm. But apparently, even magical or trees in a magical mystical land still need to go through their life cycles, and so the leaves were falling, and it really. Set a scene that I wouldn't have expected to see in Hish, but then it just sort of reinforces the idea that almost any landscape or environment can exist in any realm at any time. So sort of the juxtaposition of a place that I, in some ways, thought I knew, and a scene that I thought I knew, and put them together in surprising ways. So that was cool. Seasons in Hish. You heard it here first.
It's worth mentioning that his choice to place this in fall. I don't know if there was anything about the Broken Realms that said, like this clearly should be happening in the fall, but it was thematically a choice he's making as well. It's kind of this the coming of winter / the coming of death, right? Like the Nagash death is coming. In a similar way, winter is coming to the realm here. So kind of like a foreboding moment before, signaling something ominous to come, which I like that little touch of theme there.
Yeah, I mean, he had to have done that on purpose. That must have been an intentional thing. And no, I don't think there are any references to seasons in like the Broken Realm stuff. And so what a great opportunity to have sort of a blank slate and sort of call your shot a little bit. And you're like, no, this is the season that my story will take place in. Plus, what a great time to read this story in the fall here in Madison, Wisconsin. It's getting real fall-y out there, guys. Watch out now. All right, so let's do any other like Black Library story recommendations for folks who may have read this and like this and they want more. I'll just start with the obvious one in that The End of Enlightenment is a sequel novel, I guess, even though it came out first, about basically the once the cavalry, at some point they reach the Holy Mountain, and it's about the defense of that mountain, and it follows the Stone Mage perspective on how they fight off. Is that giving it away? No, it's not. It's coming. So how they fight off Nagash's forces and the enemies that beset them there in Ymetrica. So very cool. The writing is just as good as it ends up being in this story. Characters are great because it's got Belfenin in it, and it's even more of a insight into Lumineth culture, which I think was sorely needed, and so it's pretty tasty. Also, speaking of Lumineth novels, there's another one called Realm Lords by Dale Lucas, which is a Lumineth novel about sort of an aspirant to the Stone Temple pilots. So they're fighting off sort of the forces of chaos, and that book is pretty good too. And it's neat because it gets you a bunch of different sort of like units or like model individuals in the story, because it brings in a bunch of putting together a team sort of thing. And so you can get the viewpoints of like one of the archer people and one of the spear people and a bunch of the stone mages and stuff. And so it's cool to like give you a little snapshots into each of them. And so it's also pretty good book, and also yet another way to learn more about the Lumineth and sort of how do they operate, yada, yada, yada. So those are the two novels that I know of and have read that focus on Lumineth. There might be others. I mean, I guess there's the short story in the Dire Chasm Anthology. So there's Lumineth there as well.
That warband. If you wanted to branch out outside of Black Library, and why would you? But there is this idea of this looked at a soldier that basically almost abandoned his post, right? Like Seth, but for Belfenin having kind of sussed it out and set up in his basically extrication route, he would have run away. I was reading a book a few years ago called The Deserters by Charles Glass. It's nonfiction, but it's about deserters in World War II and kind of some of the motivations and what happened with that. It was a really intriguing read. So if this kind of sparks some interest in some of that for you, that'd be a way to read more about that. Some of the pressures, a lot of the stories that we read for this are about the kind of the glorious victories or, big combats and all of those big moments. But it's pretty interesting to delve into this other side of things. It's like the kind of fear and doubt.
Yeah, absolutely.
Even removed from the conflict itself.
Sure. I feel like we've gotten some stories from like Free Gilder, like deserters as well. It wasn't the Shadespire novel. It was about, it wasn't about the act of deserting, but it was about a deserter. And I feel like there's maybe one or two other ones as well. So like that theme, does creep up now and then. Bound to happen. It sounded like you might have more thoughts. Do you got anything else you want to talk about?
No, I guess I felt like he did a good job the author did a good job of, like I said, humanizing, which is an interesting word to use about this, but humanizing the elves for me. So I connected better with them, and there's evidence that like these motivations that Belfinen has of turning and fighting at the in that moment of his legend's creation, but his turning and fighting to be on the side of his friend, or be there for his friend who is charging forward. Like, there's evidence that is a lot of what motivates people who are actually, soldiers, men and women who are in that kind of combat situation. Like, what keeps them going is less about like the mission or the higher purpose, and more about the person to your left or to your right. And so I thought he captured that pretty well. I really like that about it, and made me enjoy it all the more.
Sure. You're kind of turning this into a review, so keep going if you want to do that part.
Yeah, I thought it was a solid little story. It was I actually just read it last night, and I was surprised. I kind of thought it was, I don't know. I didn't have like a good page count on it, so I was surprised that it was as short as it was, I guess. Mm-hmm. But it was a good bang for your buck, I suppose. as far as like we say this all the time, but like getting something interesting about like fleshing out the corners, painting in the details, or filling in the corners of the mortal realms with these short stories. That's what I really like them for. So
you and me both.
Yeah. As far as a rating, we'll give it 16 out of 19 stories included in Understrike and other stories.
Okay.
I don't, if I knew Hish better, I might have said there's probably 8 realms in that or whatever.
1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10. I want to say there's like 4 on the side, 1 in the center, and 1 on the outside, I think is how they do it. I can't remember.
All right, we'll do that. 8 out of 10. 8 out of 10 regions of Hish. I liked it, and enough that I may make some time to check out the End of Enlightenment, since you enjoyed it. And actually, I didn't realize the other books that you were kind of listing them off. I'd forgotten to take a look at that. I've enjoyed everything I've read by him so far from Black Library. So, did
you end up reading the Catacombs book?
I did. Yeah,
I like that one a lot. Right on. Any other thoughts?
No, it's just that trick where he finds a way to help you identify. He did it in Blood of the Everchosen, where there's a couple characters in there that wouldn't have expected to identify with, and he found a way to make that happen. So
sure.
Yeah, it's a strength of his, for me at least. What about you? What'd you think?
I liked it. Let's rattle off the things I liked about it. First of all, continuity. Can't get enough of that continuity. If you have 2 different stories, I can follow some characters that I know. That's all I want on a Black Library. I want every book to be about someone that I've already read about before. I'm the problem with modern cinema and books and stuff, is that I want long, sprawling series, essentially. It helped that it was about one of the characters that I really liked in the novel that I read. Belfinen, an awesome guy. I'm all about him. The reason I like this short story is Black Library excels in the short story form, but we've talked about that a million times. I don't need to get into it. But also when it's very character focused or character driven, it's you can take me to the most fantastical, wild settings. People can do the most wild, fantastical stuff. But like, I'm more glued to the page when the character themselves is interesting. For lack of, just to put it simply, like, interesting can mean a million different things, but the character needs to keep me engaged. And I think a lot of times, not pointing any fingers, but you read stories and the characters are maybe either one dimensional, which sometimes is okay. Like, I'm okay with a big, one trick individual if it means that they can do some, cool stuff. But oftentimes the characters don't have personality at all, and it's just sort of a bland, like, you can insert yourself because they're nobody. It's just a regular person. I want them to be unique. I want them to leap off a page in different ways. And this Belfinen guy, to some degree, and then sort of his reflection in Seth, they both are compelling, character arcs. They learn stuff. They grow. Whether in the past or throughout this part of the story. And you don't always get that in some the Black Library stuff. I think the best Black Library stories do sort of display that, and this is a great example of it. And Black Library stuff also sometimes devolves into sort of random, inconsequential like battles and fights and stuff. I mean, it's not bolter porn, but whatever the Age of Sigmar equivalent is. This one had none of that. I mean, I don't know if a weapon was drawn. At one point, he sets a lance down. Does that count? And so it just goes to show, at least for me, I don't need the big fights. I find a lot of times I scan through the fights because they're not that they're all the same, but like you've read one Black Library fight, you read them all. And so this reinforces the idea that I don't need those. Maybe some people do. Maybe that's the only reason some people read these stories, but that's not necessarily the reason why I do. And I didn't miss it in this story, and it would have made it worse. I don't know how you could have even included it. I guess like maybe the spirits could have came like creeping out of the woods, and then Belfin and Seth have to fight back to back, striking down. Okay, you know what? Maybe that would have been cool. Come to think of it, Richard, you missed a trick. But it didn't need it. It would have maybe weighed it down, and the delight was in learning about these two individuals. So
I think the great settings can make you, the great fantastical settings can make you say, "Wow, that's neat." But it's the characters that can make you like say, "Yeah, I really enjoyed that." Like I connected with that.
Sure. I mean, you can list out. This is maybe wandering afield a little bit. You can list off cool things about a place, and I don't need to read stories about it. You can just say, well, this place has trees are made of snakes. And like, oh, that's fun. But like, that doesn't glue me to a page. That doesn't keep me flipping through to see, who's doing what. It's the characters are most important. And I think Richard, I'm going to call him first name, more on first name basis, does a great job with his characters. And this proves it for me. And so if I'm going to give a rating, I'll give it maybe even a 9. You gave it an 8. I'll give it a 9. Autumn leaves tumbling from the trees in the blessed woods is what I'll give it. And I don't know what it would have taken to get a 10, but it was pretty darn close. And so that's what I think of this one. I recommend picking it up. And actually, listeners, if you yourself have read this story, let us know what you think. And you can see this is tricky. You can find us on all our social stuff, yada, yada, yada. So if you liked it, if you didn't like it, reach out and let us know. But David, do you have any final closing thoughts about this short story?
No, it was other than just saying it was fun to kind of have one that was a little like shorter than some of the ones we've been reading, and like without the fight scenes, combat scenes. It was nice to have that kind of change up. So I'm glad we picked this one. I'm glad we landed on this one for whatever reasons we got there.
Sure. I was worried that it didn't have enough meat on the bone to talk about, but whoa, look at that timer. Classic. And with that, it's time for our reforging. Chat with us anytime about your thoughts on Twitter at The Mortal Realms. Davey, where can they find you on the internet?
I'm at red_Zeke, or if you want to talk Underworlds with our podcast, at WTHcast.
Awesome. And I'm on Twitter at DosAsos. And obviously you can check out our other work on the story phase. And you can find all our other Mortal Realms shows and content at www.themortalrealms.com. Welcome to the Pocket Realm, a Mortal Realm short story phase. Grab your hammer so we can clear a path through the chaos and forge our own narratives in the Age of Sigmar. Your allies through the realm gates this episode are...
I'm Davy, and Aaron, do you want some pocket squigs to help you finish that food you're chomping on right now?
I do. And I'm Aaron, and your grata gets busy living or gets busy dying. And today, we are going to talk about Shriekstone. Now I have some more intensity, more energy. We're going to talk about Shriekstone by Evan Dicken. A little short story, a little ditty about some Gloomspite gits. How exciting. But before we do that, hey, Davey, how are you? What's up? How are you today?
Doing just fine. And yourself?
I'm good. Still chewing. Yeah. Let me stop talking for a second so that I can eat this, and I'll ask you. Hey, what you been up to in the hobby lately, my dude?
We had a good day outside yesterday, and so I spray coated a whole bunch of stuff to build up a winter supply to work on. So a little bit of terrain. couple war bands for Underworlds. I want to try and do the Grimwatch, some ghouls. I haven't really done anything in that lane as far as that goes. So I'm going to try and do them, gory and bloody. So that was fun. And don't tell Aaron, but I read, I was reading a Dan Abnett, which I haven't read in a while. Double Eagle, one that's about the Imperial Navy, 40K, but flyers. It has a real kind of World War II air war aviation vibe, which is pretty fun. It was pretty enjoyable, especially as far as Black Library goes. So,
right on. Very cool.
What about you? What have you been doing?
Yeah, what I've been doing. Still doing Nurgle stuff. I'm on my Plague drones currently. I started this Nurgle assembly project before we knew Nurgle was coming out. But now we do. And that really has no bearing on anything that I do. It's just a fun coincidence. And I love seeing those connections in real life.
Nurgle, we're as we were reading this, I thought too, we'll get back to it, but I was dropping the author a line, asking some questions, and then made me think of, you always trying to get on the line with Josh Reynolds.
Yeah.
And then
because we're best friends, I don't need to try hard. Like he scoops up the Aaron phone, and it's just right there. Yeah,
the Aaron line. It made me remember Order of the Fly, and it's like, oh man, how have I gone this far and I don't have an Order of the Fly army? What a cool, piece of the background.
You would have to do some. I mean, you could just have Nurgle and say it's Order of the Fly. You'd have to do quite a bit of like converting to like really make them look real knightly. I mean, you got the Blight Kings, but the rest of the range doesn't really buy into that.
Yeah.
Definitely doable.
Yeah, there's a few factions. Not to digress too far, but there's a few factions in the background where I just really love reading about them, and maybe that's enough for me. Like I really love reading about. I was just mentioning ghouls, right? Like the flesh eater courts. Not the biggest fan of the model range, but man, they're so fun to read about. And maybe Order of the Fly is the same thing for me.
Sure. And at least for me, like nothing I could do would ever make them live up to what they were in my head. And so like, I'm not gonna tempt fate by even attempting it. So
yeah, that's
see, there's that self-deprecation, right? Slide that one right in there.
That's why you got to role play them, do a little Soulbound or something.
Coincidentally, I don't know if you heard, but I did just, I don't, when this is going to hit, so if it's even pertinent anymore. But yes, we done that Soulbound game about a year or so ago. Just one little session of what would have been a larger campaign that we just sort of fizzled out and didn't do the rest of. But I released it on Patreon, which is where most people are probably listening to this episode. So folks can just see how bad of a GM I am and a little Soulbound taste. It's weird that like we are so coincident. We are so in Soulbound's lane, and yet we talk about it so little.
Yeah.
So I wanted to throw out what tidbit I had about our relation to the Soulbound space. That was a weird way of phrasing that. In terms of reading stuff, I'm not reading anything currently right now because we have to decide on Davy's book club book. But whatever it ends up being is what we'll read. It's not The Road, probably. It's going to be a different book.
Peter's at full spread there to try and see what put a wide variety out. I think it was The Road, Summerland, and then Anthology called The Paper Menagerie.
Yeah. So I think that one's winning the compilation, mainly because it allows people just to read as much as they can for book club, and they don't have to miss out on reading a whole novel.
On that softball would have
making it easy. Yep. But enough about non-Age of Sigmar stories. Blah, get the taste out of our mouths. Let's get a palate cleanser and hop into talking about Shriekstone by Evan Dicken. I'm trying to think if we've read any Evan Dicken stuff. I think we did. He did a novella, Path to Glory. I think that was him.
That we received that pretty well.
I think so. Yeah.
It was a different take than we'd seen at the time. It was kind of the side of things of how people in the Mortal Realms, what happened to them, like as the Age of Chaos came on. That was pretty fun. I remember at the time really enjoying getting a different perspective.
Yeah, I agree. I guess before we go any farther, we have to officially jump into the story phase, though. So to do so, I need your help, if you would be so kind.
Oh, okay. The story phase. In the story phase, we delve into the stories, characters, creatures, and environments of the 9 realms.
Yeah, keep going.
The story. I don't know if I always say that. As vengeful Duarden gather to reclaim their ancestral home, Ratgob, ruler of Shriekstone, is determined to defend what's his from the stunties and his ambitious shaman.
Ooh, it kind of gives a little bit of away. Gives the story away right then and there. But let's, guys, listeners, pretend you didn't hear that, and let's talk our spoiler-free section about Shriekstone here, and let's lead right off the bat with why we're going to read this. Davy, I'll ask you first. Did you have any burning reasons as to why we picked this story, or smoldering?
In the same way that the last one we picked was from a Lumineth perspective, which I felt like we hadn't done a whole lot of in the past. This one was from a Gloomspite Git perspective, which is something we haven't done a bunch of. And so for me, it was about getting some more perspectives into our reviews. And I thought that would be fun. So honestly, I thought about this and some other things along those lines. So I think I threw out 3 and you picked amongst the 3. So how did we end up on this one?
That's a good question. I think at the time I thought that we are entering this age of beasts, and of the 3 stories, this one was the most destruction leaning. And so that might have been just all the reason entirely. But to your point about not necessarily having a lot of Gloomspite exposure, I remember when we read the Gloomspite novel, someone's complaint, or maybe it was most people's complaint, was that like it was Gloomspite on the title or on the cover, but it wasn't very much Gloomspite perspective in the book. And so maybe without ever consciously thinking about that, maybe knowing that I didn't get the perspective there left me wanting to get a Gloomspite perspective somewhere else. And so subconsciously, I think I was drawn to this book for that same reason.
Whether or not it was most people's complaint, I think our own Paul Wagner complained enough for it to be.
I was dancing around it, yeah. So in that case, we got to dive right in, feet first, into a little Gloomspite story. Trust, or suffice it to say that you get Gloomspite perspective, whether you like it or not here. So let's jump to the when. When does the story take place, and does it relate to anything that we know or love in the timeline thus far? I'm seeing a head shaked.
We don't know, and we can't say, is kind of the short of it. Well, no, I'll take that back. The one thing we do know is that it is at some point in the timeline after the Caradhran overlords are back in the mix.
True. Well, that's a good shot.
So I guess after, and then, I mean, you can then conclude forward that also the Gates of Azir have opened because it looks like there's Dispossessed involved as well. There's kind of a grand alliance at one point.
Okay.
And that's about as conclusive as I can get. Did you have...
I'm wondering, and maybe I'll cut this out because I can't recall. Did the Ban Moon not really really start kicking off until after the Necroquake? Did like the Necroquake somehow supercharge the Gloomspite? I don't know if I can say that. I don't know if we know that for sure.
Say it with more authority and then edit it out if you're wrong when you do your extensive research after the podcast, which is the perfect time to do your research.
Yeah, that's true. That's true. I'll tell you what, I don't care if I sound speculative. I'm not going to say it again with more authority. I don't know that I have more authority in me. So we'll leave it at that. Yeah, this is as authoritative as I get. So there's not a lot of when, but that's okay. I think when you're dealing with Gloomspite are timeless. A grot in the Age of Myth probably functions very similarly to a grot that functions in the Age of Sigmar. So not a lot of differences there. But if we're going to go down the list of our W's, let's jump into a where. Where is the story taking place?
Gur for sure. And it is a mountain that's known by a couple different things, but the gets known as Shriekstone. So
yeah. And what do we know about mountains in Gur is they are hungry, and if not sentient, at least alive. I think every resident of Gur has to be cognizant of the mountains. You always got to keep an eye on those mountains. You never know. You never know what they're up to. Real shifty, tectonic shifty. So that's the where. I'm trying to think if there's any. I mean, we don't really leave the mountain. That's all we need to know. So there's not much else there. Let's keep going on the list. Who are we dealing with here? I think it was mentioned in the preamble. So who's this Ratgob?
He's a loon boss, but more importantly, he's the High Creeper Shriekstone, which is quite the title.
I've been called that.
Oh dear. Oh no. But yeah, we got his point of view essentially exclusively. We encounter some other characters through his point of view, but it's a short story. Is not gonna switch a lot of perspectives here.
Sure.
get to know him a little bit. So
You'd be hard pressed to do so. Yep. So a little loom boss.
if you wanted to, you could say that the antagonist, so to speak, is Thunas Grimnir, so a rune father who we see a few times, but mostly it's about Radgob.
Yeah, right. Which is what we were saying. We want that Gloomspite perspective. That's all we need.
Yep.
And I think that's going to bring us to the end of our W's, unless there's any other whats that we want to talk about here and now before we jump into our spoiler coverage.
No, I think we got it covered. We know why we're here, why we're reading it, and we get the basis. So
yeah.
Let's jump in.
Let's why keep them waiting? Let's jump right into the spoilers. All right, so this is going to be some sort of spoiler phase. And
we need to write up something for the spoiler phase. In the same way as we have in the story phase we delve into, shouldn't we have?
Oh, sure, yeah, that could work. Or I want someone to record like a fun spoiler phase bumper, and then like and then like have it like in the lyrics of the thing, being like, "We're gonna ruin this book for you." Remix that one, which in one of my favorite movie podcasts, the Slash Filmcast, they have such a huge following that one of their listeners remixed some of the things that they said in their show, made a little song out of their words, and like it's all techno-y and cool. So spoiler phase. Let's start at the beginning because it's a very good place to start. Paul knows that. Where do we begin? I'm trying to think. So I think we're outside the mountain. We're not at the heart of it quite yet, right?
Yeah, the Gloomspite led by Radgob have encountered a Fireslayer patrol / scout, and actually, even before we get that far, the book the short story opens with a little poem, I guess. So it's "Oi, tell the Loon King you get skulking by, that here rotting in the gloom we lie." Author unknown. Wilvar Borison translation, which sounds like there's some dwarf scholar out there who's translating goblin stuff, which, wow. All right.
Dangerous line of work.
I read this and I was like, that's cool. That has like a tempo to it that feels like it's adapting something. And the only thing I can think of, like, A.E. Hausman has this really powerful thing like "Here Dead We Lie," when we found that, and it didn't really line up. So I dropped a line to Evan Dicken on Twitter and said, "Hey, what's up with this?" And he, in kind words, pointed out that I'm not very well read, because it's the opening poem it's from Simonides. Simonides' ode to the Spartans who died at Thermopylae, and go tell the Spartans, stranger passing by, that here, obedient to their laws, we lie. So I thought that was super cool. I really like that kind of touch on a story. But anyway.
And I like that our authors are present or are approachable enough that you could flat out ask. You wouldn't have known. Like you would have done some Googling and you wouldn't necessarily have found it, and we wouldn't have known. But Evan was more than gracious enough to clue us in. That's neat.
Yeah. Anyway, so it's a cool way to kick it off. But yeah, so they are killing off the last of this Fireslayer band, but as he dies, he is saying, like, there's going to be tons more of us coming.
And so that it hits our loon boss Radgob in, I guess, a myriad of ways, right? In that, like, Grots are instinctually like scared cats, right? But at the same time, like, he's the loon boss, and so he has to have some measure of bravado, as much as a Grot can be. And so he needs to make sure that, like, if he's going to hold on to his control here, like, he's able to tackle this problem in some way. And so there, this sort of goes through his inner monologue and his calculations as to how he's going to handle this new issue, because apparently they've been living in Shriekstone for generations of Grots, which I don't know how long a Grot lives.
I don't know.
Yeah, true. But he comes from a long line of loon boss or high creepers in this case. Yeah. And so it's now this is now his task to sort of weather and survive and to see if he can maintain control.
Yeah, this whole exchange is really fun too. And what's interesting is that Radgob can speak Duarden, and this kind of surprises the scout. But he's like, well, obviously, I got to be able to tell my slaves like what I need them to do. So,
That caught me off guard too. Like, wait, what?
So they have a conversation here, and I really like, the Duarden saying very Duarden things, like I think we find out that this lodge is Lachad Lodge, and but he'll say these place names, and Radgob's like, what do you he says,
never heard of it.
Gold of Lachad shall be ours again. Lachad, never heard of it. He's like, what? You're living right in it. And he's like, oh, okay. Well, we call it something else. Sort of. There's a fun cultural differences thing going on here that is pretty enjoyable. It also turns out Radgob's not the only one who can speak Duarden, because his shaman, who gets carried in later, tips his hat after some of the other guys go away, and lets it be known that he heard it. So Radgob's like, ooh, this is kind of freaking me out. I'm just going to kill this guy now. And everyone else is like a little unnerved by all the shouting, but they didn't understand it. And as they're going away, the shaman's like, what are you going to do about all those stunties coming to get us? He's like, I should have known this guy knew how to speak Duarden as well. He's like, I'm not worried about it. I'm going to have a plan. He's like, I hope you do. All that stuff about our bones getting stomped into dust is kind of important, like so.
He'd be totally secure if he didn't have to worry about anybody else knowing. But it ends up being throughout the story that this shaman is heck, I'm sure all the Gits are antagonistic towards each other, but there's a particular antagonistic relationship between Radgob and Spookfinger, is the guy's name. And so that's the last thing he needs, is to have this guy sort of peeking over his shoulder and undermining with shared knowledge that they have. You said he got carried in. I couldn't picture what was it, a palanquin? What is he being carried in on? Could you tell?
Carried in on a cave squig skull, which for me I was like, I didn't know that I would have necessarily guessed that squigs had skulls. I thought they were
just rubbery,
mushroomy, but it could be. Who knows? So.
I mean, I guess the teeth have to go into something, they have to attach to something. Anyways, was he being carried by Grots, or was that also the Duarden slaves carrying him? I couldn't pick that up either.
I feel like in this scene, I assumed it was Grots, and I feel like he might have gotten more of a reaction from this prisoner or this last survivor, if there'd been they might have rebelled or something like that. But it's a little unclear. Later, it mentions slaves again carrying him around. I was like, maybe these are Duarden. We do encounter some of those later. But it becomes kind of a plot point a little bit later too. Yeah, this scene transitions in a pretty cool way, just a fun little piece of writing where Spookfinger's like, hey, it seems pretty important. And Radgob's like, only nutters believe stunty gab. They always lie. Pause. Shank me. They must have brought every bearded nutter in Gur. I was like, I think that got me an out loud chuckle. I enjoyed that quite a bit. So
shank me. I gotta rope or weave that into my vernacular. Shank me. Yeah. And part of the transition that's cool too is after he ends up killing that one guy, the dwarf that he's talking to. He's like, all right, well, we're gonna butcher him up for dinner. I'm like, oh yeah, they probably eat these people, don't they? Yeah. I don't like that. Yeah. Not for me. For some reason, it's okay when an orc or an ogre does, but when it's these little with their little knives, no thanks. And then speaking of shank me and their fun little colloquialisms, there's a handful of races that talk in very unique ways in the Age of Sigmar, or in the Mortal Realms. Skaven being one of them, but throughout this book, it really becomes clear the cadence and the verbiage that the Grots use here are uniquely Grots, and so that's one of the benefits of reading books from their perspective, is you get to sort of be immersed in how they talk, and then you find yourself talking like them after you finish reading your story, and then your wives give you weird looks. And why are you talking like that? So where do we go from here, Davy?
Well, I assume they were looking out from the mountain at people gathering below, but they're actually using something called a scry ball. Which scry ball. That's fine. It's like a crystal ball. It's a little gnarlier than that. I think it's an eye from the mountain. So the mountain used to have eyes all over it, like this living mountain had eyes all around it, and they've been systematically plucked out by the Gloomspite while they were here. I'm sure in part because of cruelty, but also because can't have all the lads spying on anyone. That's only boss's stuff. So in order to be the only one with one of these things that can, it seems like, kind of scrying glass, see out.
I see. I got confused by he was using a greasy lens, and I was thinking that it was just like a telescope type thing. But no, okay. Next sentence, literally covered in eyes. Ew. I was having a good day before you told me that, and now I don't know that that's true anymore. But that was for bosses only. So the Dwarven sort of array themselves out, sort of on full display at the base of the mountain. And it turns out that this is, I think earlier the dwarf says the force marching on this mountain is the greatest that Gur has ever seen in terms of accumulation of dwarves. And it's not just fire slayers, but it's the other brands of dwarves as well. Yeah. Which I wonder if that, probably not explicitly, but like there's rumors that they're gonna soup the dwarf books together and that they're all gonna sort of get brought under one banner. I don't necessarily think that's why he wrote that this way, but at the same time, it very much could be a more common occurrence in the future to see sort of this alliance across dwarves. And although it's mentioned that they're sort of allied, it turns out, like, as the book progresses, all we're really dealing with is the fire slayers. Maybe that's just because they're the only ones who are best suited to fighting in the tunnels of this mountain, as we shall soon see. But suffice it to say that it leaves the Grots a little trembly to actually see the full force of Dwarven out there. And so much so that Ratgob, for a while there, considers just flat out turning around and leaving. He sees what's up. He says, I'm going to go run to the vault real quick. I guess got to go pick something up. And he plans on looting what he can and getting the heck out of Dodge, which tracks for me. That makes sense from a Git's perspective. And for a while there, I thought that's the direction the story was going, like the fleeing through the mountain to get away from the Dwarden. But it turns out that's not the case. Davy, what happens then?
Well, he's working through the hallway, and then hallways of this place, and you get some cool descriptions. Some of the things of a Dwarden hall that's been taken over by Grots. There's statues. I guess high creepers get to have, if they survive long enough, they get to have a statue carved of them. And he sees his statues only just started. Like his magnificent nose is getting carved in, and then like. Yesterday by the Beatles starts playing in the background, and he starts sad about leaving this place. And there's honestly like some sort of sentimental stuff. He's like, I was runted here, I was born here. I came up with the mobs. I stabbed a whole bunch of gits in the back to like get where I'm at. Like
more than I can count.
Yeah, exactly. And so he's thinking about all this, and he's like, man, do I really want to start again? And then it's almost this like sigh. I guess I'm not going to go just yet. And it feels like a challenging thing to do, is right. Like here's a Grot finding his courage, quote unquote, for something. And so credit to Evan Dicken, who wrote it in a way that I 100% believed it. Then he kind of decides like, let me see if I can get this thing together. And and meanwhile, as he's getting deeper in, it's clear that like other goblins are like totally abandoning ship here. They're all scattering. So it's like, I gotta put my foot down before we lose too many of these to running off. And so moves us to the next scene where they kind of got in the council, like they're putting hey, we're going to do this. Here's our plan, sort of thing.
Yeah. And it reminds me of Home Alone, is what it is. At some point where he thinks about fleeing, he's going to run from the bad guys, and then he says, "No, this is my home." Yeah. Kevin McAllister decides, you know what? There's a quote. He says something like right when he decides that he's going to stay and defend the house. I can't remember what it is, but that's essentially what he does. And he's like, "All right, well, we're going to put together a plan, and we're going to defend what's ours, essentially." And you would mention the idea that like he crosses a bunch of like scenes or sort of environments as he's walking through the tunnels, and that was one of my favorite parts of the book, whether here or as it's talked about later, is how one sort of desecrates or devolves a dwarven hold into what the the Grots consider, homey, and how they're digging their own tunnels, or how they're repurposing like the throne room, and all the things that they do with it there. And I think we'll probably talk about how he alludes to them here, but then they end up being important later, which is fun, being like, oh, I know what's going to happen in this room, because he had mentioned what he saw as he walked by.
Yeah,
which is kind of fun.
There's the one I want to call out here is the pit, which he says it's where like the Duarden, when they had too much ale, used to empty their guts. So I assume it's like an open latrine.
Yeah, gotta be.
Did you get?
I think so. Yeah.
And that's just where the trogs are living. They're just down in there, like, oof, gnarly.
Just snoozing, which is pretty cool. So I'm trying to think of what's the first Home Alone thing that they do is, it's not in the mountain, right? I think they set up a diversion out in the Dwarven camp. And so he sends a whole bunch of like squig riders on one end of the camp to cause havoc, as they do. And the shout goes through up the dwarf camp to say, hey, no, and they all, converge on what the problem is. And in doing so, it leaves an opening for, a crack team of infiltrator Grots with Rotgab leading them, which is surprising. I would have thought he would have had someone else do it, but I suppose if you want something done right, you got to do it yourself. Yeah. And they sneak into where the ale is being held for the Dwarven, because obviously that's a very important resource for this attacking force. And so they, taint it, poison it in some way, and then they run away giggling.
Yeah, and it shows like a knowledge of their enemy, because there's someone like, hey, there's no food here. We're supposed to be ruining supplies. And he's like, hey, listen, like, they'll fight without water. They'll fight without food. They won't fight without is their ale. And so they go to poison it, which is pretty rad. And this whole thing has some like fun things. There's I can't remember what he calls them. He's got the guys he's sneaking in with, like what are they? Ratgob and his sneaks. Faces masked, blades blackened with soot. Like that would be a fun unit to introduce. Some kind of sneaky backfield ninja Grots. It'd be pretty cool. So
sure. They trained in the temples of Clan Eshin, right? They've got their ninja stuff on.
That and then like his strategy back at the beginning, where because their gates are getting pounded on. He's set up his wheeled some of his rock lobs and artillery out, and they haven't had much of effect. But he's like forcing some guys to maintain a presence just to like keep up appearances at the front, other than the main attack, which is squig hoppers. But then the next line is like, and he had all his best archers. Like, oh wow, just getting up. It's like they were further down the tunnel to make sure to shoot any of the guys who ran away. I was like, all right, Rex, that sounds grotty.
And also part of his plan, he had mentioned the idea that like he well, and I guess this leads into the next section, is that now that he's poisoned the Dwarden, like he has further steps in his traps and plans and things like that, and he kind of wants to kick those off and just like have them stumble into his plans. And in doing so, if he would, he would just leave the doors wide open, just let them walk right in and fall into whatever he has set up for him. But that would be too obvious, and those stunties are smart enough to see. So he has to pretend to put up like this fight to make it seem like he's resisting them, but all like, in the long run, he's really welcoming them in. Yeah. He's not going to beat them, hand to hand. He's going to have to beat them sneakily in the mountain tunnels.
So then I think the next scene, they are coming. The Dwarden are coming in through the main door, and we've had a little bit of this where the mountain, like if you cut into it, it'll shriek or scream. It's part of why it's called Shriekstone.
Hence the name, yeah.
And as the Rune Father comes in through the front door, there's like an almost hopeful warble that comes from the mountain, and like, that makes me feel even worse about everything I've heard about the mountain so far. So like, with the idea of the mountain being sentient, it's like, oh hey, like some benevolent dwellers may finally be returning after this awful torture of having Grots crawling around inside me.
Davey, I have a question for you real quick. What do you think a hopeful warble sounds like? Oh, that's so hopeful. I'm a little hopeful. I was glass half empty. I'm glass half full now. Yeah, right. And so all throughout the story, I just sort of talk about how it intersperse sort of the mountain's audible or physical like reactions to what's going on. And I guess just to remind you throughout the, you're fighting in the innards of like this living thing, which, like you said, adds a certain level of weight to the outcome of what happens here.
Yeah,
and then sympathy as well.
And yeah, this even the Rune Father has a line here: "By Grimnir, what have those monsters done to you?" Which you can think of Dwarden saying to something inanimate, like a blade or piece of armor or something like that they're particularly fond of. But with that answering reply, you're like, oh man, like there's kind of like a symbiotic or cooperative relationship between the mountain and the Dwarden, and that was just it's some of the best AOS fiction can do that sort of thing, like that cool idea with just a few lines, and I feel like he's done it here with some of this.
Yeah, well, and it connects two things that you knew sort of independently and puts it in a new light, in that like dwarves and mountains go together, right, hand in hand, and we kind of know just throughout history, other formats, other settings, what that looks like, dwarves under the mountain kind of thing. But what if dwarves were under a living mountain? Yeah. And that's uniquely AOS. I mean, it's not only uniquely AOS, it's uniquely Gur AOS, like, because there are other mountains in other places where this isn't true. Sure. In the mortal realms, but it is uniquely true here, in the same way that, what does a dwarf look like when he lives in Guymer? Well, it's those root kings, right? Well, what's a dwarf look like when he lives in Gur? Mountain best friends, which is kind of cool. All right, what happens now? So the like we said, the fire slayers make it in. And I think the first trap is this the throne room? It must be.
This is the squigs. So they've got a bunch of like moss and gravel tossed over some rickety planks.
Yeah.
In order to conceal it. And it's a big pit trap, but not just a big pit trap, but a pit trap filled with squigs.
How do you improve a pit trap? Fill it with squigs.
So the magma droths who are at the front go kind of tumbling into this. And even some of the first few ranks of slayers, because they're in this headlong, furious charge, they're kind of getting by. They're burning through some of this poison just by like pure angriness, by fury. But the squigs really chomp up the magma droths in a big way, and then get a bunch of slayers. There's I think there's like a berserker that goes down. They call out some of the different unit types you'll see in Fire Slayer armies. The Hearthguard come and try and melt them all down. But the other part of this pit trap is that there's scaffolding put in for the squigs to climb up now that the top is knocked away. So kind of disastrous from the Fire Slayer perspective. However, there's lots of them.
I was gonna say it's like a story trope where there's just as many fire slayers as there needs to be to like die, but then also have enough to like trigger the next thing. So like, yes, it seems like this is a showstopper, and yet the next scene is just yet another wave of the fire slayers pushing through.
Yeah,
it's fun to see squigs. Fun. I don't know what's fun. Squigs tear through like sort of infantry lines, and like what they do to just like. People like your regular humanoid kind of things, but I don't know that I see squigs go toe to toe with like big beasts all that much. And what's a squig do when it's facing down? Not facing down because it's a whirling mess of teeth and claws. Something much larger than itself. It very much has like a kind of like a piranha feel a little bit.
As bipedal piranhas.
Yeah. How do you? It's the age old question. How do you eat a magma droth one bite at a time?
Yeah.
So there's lots of bites occurring down here in these pits. So there, we eliminated a chunk of the fire slayers. Moving on, next Home Alone trap. So actually, I was gonna say soon thereafter. How does he trigger the centipedes? I forget. Like, what does he do?
They all start hooting and hollering. Like the shaman triggers a signal, lets out a whoop fit to wake the dead, conjured a bolt of jagged greenish lightning that blasted one of the fire slayers from its nasty feet, beard burning. The signal was taken up by other gits, and soon the cavern echoed with mad whoops. So all that whooping kind of spooks a bunch of segmapedes out with all their crazy noise, like that. And these segmapedes we've actually seen in passing before. It sounds like they're just giant centipedes.
Just giant centipedes. Yeah. Is that not enough for you?
That's enough. And so they come barreling out of the side caves and start doing a bunch of damage. And but then of course the slayers have managed to kind of head that off, take care of that as well. Ratgob gets a cool line, or like just a little, again, that sort of show off. His delight soured as the Rune Father starts chopping stuff up. So
how dare he? How dare he?
Yeah, and he has, when he convinced everyone, he didn't really have a plan. He came up with one after the fact, and he's sticking to it now because they're like, hey, should we attack now? And he's like, no, we got more surprises. They can have the hall. We're gonna fall back.
Yeah.
They drop back to set up the next trap.
Can't wait. So the next one is, so they lure the Duardin, and they're not. It's a smaller space now. I think the last scene was in a much bigger, like wide open, like hall or something like that. But now it gets a little bit more narrow, and as they are funneled in, who does he let loose this time? And we didn't. I don't know that we got. I don't know if they mentioned this as part of his tour of the mountain before, but any good loon boss worth his salt is going to have a whole mess of fanatics under his control, or not. I mean, literally the opposite of under his control, not under his control. But what they do is they, slap him on in, and so the Duardin are caught by surprise. I would be surprised too by the whirling dervish that is these fanatics with their balls and chains wrecking house. And this scene was cool, at least for me, because it's one thing to just talk about, the balls are smacking into people. Oh no, you got knocked down. Just the graphic nature of how he described what it would look like, and the different ways that getting tangled up in one of these balls and chains would flat out kill you, which I hadn't really gotten before. This was new to me.
Yeah, the very first one to go down, it's got that first fire slayer into the tunnel, and he holds up a fist, hold on, I think there's something here. And then he sees them, and he has time to take a breath to yell, and then he's just gone.
Yeah.
the chain. It was a fairly graphic set of scenes here, but it was cool. There's also another trap that they're working on, but it seems to not be working. The Duardin are almost at the vents. But his chief poisoner, who we had met earlier, is saying, "Yeah, no, there's something blocking the vents. Like my thing. He's got this. He's worked up this loon mist, which will make people have delusions. But it sounds like it's supposed to go in through the vents, but he can't get it to discharge, basically. So all the loons go zipping about with their chains. And they're like, holy cow, they're still coming. And then they can't get it to go. His poisoner's like, heck with this, I'm getting out of here. Ratgob is trying to make, instead of just getting out of here, he's he reaches up in there, he's trying to figure out, he's trying to unclog the drain, and he uses his his wound slicer,
yeah, his sickle sword thing. Yeah,
there's something big and soft in the way, and I thought it was gonna be some big fungal growth or something like that. It's a big old mass of dead snotlings who've gone and clogged things up. And he has he's I don't know, were they just goofing off doing snotling things, or did somebody tell him to go up in there to kind of mess us up? But with a wet slurp, the mass blocking the pipe finally gave way, deluging Ratgob and the stunty with hundreds of dead snotlings. Pretty gross.
Yeah.
But as they come loose, then all the loon mist, this super powerful psychotropic poison, comes pouring in, and it makes all the fire slayers start freaking out, and they get paranoid, and they end up starting fighting. They're fighting each other.
Yeah. I don't know the rules well enough for the Gits to know if this is a real thing or not. A lot of this, not everything. I guess the centipedes aren't in the game per se, but a lot of this other stuff is obviously represented in models and stuff. I wonder if this mist has a role or some effect in the game. Hey listeners, you probably know, let me know, tell me if this is in the game. But it's very cool, and it's yet another tool in their arsenal to sort of highlight the fact that Gits aren't necessarily strong. They're not the most savvy with the weapon, but they have tools at their disposal still, and they use them to great effect.
Well, yeah. So this is causing pretty horrible things in the Slayers lines, but then with some rune magic, the Fire Slayers are able to kind of burn that cloud away. So they work their way through this one again. It's fall back again for the Gloom Spite.
It's a big mountain, plenty of place to fall back into.
Yeah. Our next scene, they're kind of waiting. He's got I got one more trap. It's a big one. But but it's got to go to give us a chance. And they collected up Fire Slayer slaves who sound pretty rough. Like they've had their runes pried out of them, they've been shaved, all that sort of thing. And so they're having them kind of tied together, calling out for help is the idea.
And like led down into a pit, like at the last minute, right? And he's like, you can't do it too soon. Like you got to wait just at the right time. And they are led into a pit. Some might call a latrine, perhaps. I don't know. Maybe we would call it a latrine. And they're plopped into that space that we were talking about before, where the trogs are living. And so, like right when the living, the invading Dwarden reach the point where they can hear what's going on. They can hear their kinsmen getting chomped on by the trogs down below. And like any good Dwarden, they come rushing in to sort of, save what they can, not necessarily knowing. They're driven by concern, essentially. And then they come rushing, some might say to their doom, because the trogs have something to say about this.
Yeah, you can see there's even a pause here where the Rune Father's like, it doesn't explicitly say this, but like he's struggling with this, and you figure he must know this is a trap, but he's like, even if it's a trap, we got to do our duty here, leave no Dwarden behind. And then they go. And so there's a big old Trogoth battle, including that gets the Rune Smiter who's been bopping around here, helping out with magic. That just smushes him flat with one of these Trogoths.
Yeah, big old handed.
And then it's the typical problem with all Trogoths is once they've kind of done their initial damage, and they kind of forget what's going on and they wander off in different directions. Some
of them even turn on the Grots too, and then they just sort of like, oh, there's something I can go eat, so they just turn in their direction and chase them down. And so because of this, it is now high time that the Grots actually full on like flee. Like he's run out of sly traps and tricks. It's high time for him to turn tail, and he did what he could, but that's basically the end of it. However, it's not the end of our story, because he still has enemies. There's enemies on his tail, but there's enemies at his side as well. Yeah. And this is where the shaman makes a play to essentially kill him and, take whatever control he can in the long run. Though control of what, I don't know. Like there's not much else to like save here. But he and the Master Poisoner, who's been sort of following throughout the story as well, between the two of them, they try to take him down.
It's there's a fun exchange where he's like, and earlier he'd been like, man, Spookfinger's going to betray me. I hope he's just more creative than a knife in the back. And that ends up being exactly what he tries. And he's like, a knife in the back? Come on, man. Like, you can do better than that.
You're better than that. Yeah.
Spookfinger's like, well, it is poisoned. And the rat gob's like, hey, and like look at his poisoner like, what the hell? And that guy's just like kind of shrug, like, well,
when it's bound to happen.
Got to do what I got to do. But he managed to down the shaman, get rid of Spookfinger. Then he decides to keep the poisoner alive. So
yeah, because he understands, he knows what's up. He's like, he was bound to betray me anyways. Like anyone in this position would. So like, I'm not even mad about it, because that's just par for the course. And I don't know if he says it outright, but it's just one of those, like, it's better the betrayer I know than like introducing some other character who's also going to try and like betray me. At least I know this guy's deal.
Yeah. Forget had betrayed him. True. But a little double cross now and again was only natural. Besides, I still need the poisoner. All right.
Yeah, exactly. And so you've put him in his place temporarily. So like, that's no big, like, you're good for now. Yeah. And obviously he's got bigger fish to fry currently. It's around this time after the fight that like the Rune Father finally does catch up with him. For all intents and purposes, it's kind of a little bit of a 1v1 duel. Like, I mean, it's not presented as such, but like that's a lot of what happens. I mean, the Rune Father yells a bunch of Dwarven stuff at him, and the Grot is just snickery and trying to just fight for his life essentially.
Yeah, another great exchange, which honestly I think has been one of the strongest parts of this. But Thunas Grimnir is kind of thundering. He's by grung knees and eternal eyes, did you think you could outwit me? And Rakab's like, I did it 4 times already. I figured one more wouldn't hurt,
Mm-hmm. That's pretty good. And although I say duel, like it's a duel for a grot, which is every once in a while he throws his lieutenants at him as well, and like he's got one grot who's all about like choking stuff, and so he's got long fingers and he throws him at him, he tries to choke him, and some other pair are trying to snare him up. Yeah, exactly. So it's not a duel in a classic sense that you and I would duel, and we have and we will again. It's a grot type duel, but eventually all his tricks are exhausted, all his underlings are defeated, and it seems, I mean, and between the Runefather and the grot, they're all beaten and bloodied. Rat Goblin has a leg chopped off at some point. Like he is exhausted and he's clearly gonna lose.
Yeah.
But then what happens then?
Well, he's the Runefather is standing over him, getting ready. At last our oath is fulfilled. Loon Boss lay back, waiting for that death blow. And this is quite a last stand from goblins. It was kind of cool.
Yeah.
And then he thinks he's hearing like a voice emerge from everything. And then there's a yellow-green light bleeding into the cave, seeming to congeal in the very air. From the deep tunnels, there come a low, threatening rumble. And this has been kind of foreshadowed throughout. Like, he hears a rumble. He's like, I don't have time to think about that. This mountain used to be all full of lava, and a crackling roar. And in that roar, he can hear the slap of feet on stone. Many feet, shrieks and cackles echoed in the gloom. And then the Duarden are like, what's going on? They're confused. And he says, the bad moon will avenge me. Which actually bookends at the very start. The first thing we hear that the first captive say is Grungni will avenge me.
Oh, I didn't put that together. Cool.
And the mountain begins to scream once more. So it's a little like it's left a little ambiguous. What exactly is happening? Is it that there's a big flood of gits coming in from somewhere? Is it that lava is boiling up and it's just sort of his dying delusions are making it, you're thinking of it in a particular way. It talks about he hears, he thinks 4 words are being formed. I tried to figure out what those were and I couldn't quite sort it out, and also asked Evan Dicken this, and he says it's meant to sort of echo the words at the front, which I said Grungni. I should say Grimnir will avenge me. I'm too much of a KO player to remember that Grimnir is the one to go.
I didn't even catch it.
Grimnir will avenge me. So that also bookends here. So I don't know, what did you think had happened here? I couldn't decide if it was a flood of Gloomspite gits coming, or the lava has been stirred up.
No, I thought it was the flood. So the bad moonlight is shining in through like the yellow. So we always talk about the sickly yellow green light. I think it's bleeding from the bad moon deep into the cave here through reflected through any number of tunnels and so on and so forth. And so when it talks about shrieks and cackles echoing from the gloom, mad chants, and then the slap of feet on stone, that sounds to me like a git horde coming up from down below. Very Lord of the Rings, right? Mines of Moria kind of thing.
Yeah.
You hear them hooting and hollering, echoing from the tunnel and rising up. So that was the vibe that I got. It could be lava because they were talking a lot about what just the mountain, and it always felt like the mountain somehow itself was going to pay off.
Some rumble coming from below.
Yeah. So I understand why you thought that. It's just that it doesn't necessarily jive with the footfalls, which is what we were hearing. I would have liked to have had both, right? Like I wanted the mountain to kind of have its due, and I don't know that it. I mean, this is more of a conversation after the plot, but like I don't know that the mountain ever really got its say on the matter, which I thought it was going to.
I guess I couldn't quite decide if the footfalls were actually there or if he was hearing them like in the sound of other things,
Oh yeah, and maybe he did hear them and they were just fleeing, or he was hallucinating because he's almost dead and it's all part of the din of what's going on. And
right,
I'm not sure.
Like, well, and I like that it's a little bit ambiguous. Like I thought that was really cool moment. So a crackling roar that seemed to fill the entire cavern. In it, Rat God heard the slap of feet on stone. So I couldn't tell if that was like if he didn't have the in it there. It would be more clear. But anyway, I think there's a couple ways.
All of the above,
and that's fun. Yeah. That's cool.
It is fun. A voice emerged from the mad babble. 4 words formed from the giggles and shrieks of 1,000 grots. What? So what did he say when you asked him? I didn't see that. He said it was supposed to reflect what?
It was supposed to reflect the 4 words spoken by the captive at the start. So he says, 4 words Rakab says at the end are hopefully meant to echo the first scene where he kills the Duarden scout. And I went back to that, and the Dwarden Scout says, Grimnir will avenge me.
Grimnir will avenge me. That's 4 words.
Yeah.
But this is the bad moon. Like, unless he's counting that as 1 word.
Well,
the bad moon.
Right. And so that
me.
like I was kind of back and forth with that. Like maybe it's that he's remembering that and he says that. I don't know. Like there was.
Evan, you're too cryptic, man. I need to spell it out. I'm a simple man. You need to spell it out for me.
No, I thought it was great.
No, I kid. It's worth mentioning. I don't know how to even tie this in. It's not the bad moon that like, or the arrival of the bad moon that defeats the Rune Father. Actually, the Grot kills the Rune Father. Like he's like poisons him, right? And like the Rune Father starts to foam at the mouth and he falls dead.
Yeah.
Chalk a win for our loon bosses here.
You know, it's one of those tropes you would often see with a heroic figure fighting a monster, like threw something right in the roaring mouth. And this is kind of turned on its head, where you know he's about to be finished off by the Rune Father, managed to jam poison in the Rune Father's mouth. So
that is a great point. That's awesome. Yeah, what a great parallel. I hadn't even thought about the beauty of reading books from the perspective of what is traditionally a bad guy, that you can sort of draw. What does that look like on it when the coin's flipped on the other side? That's awesome. Any other plot stuff you want to talk about?
I think that about covered it.
Okay.
What about you?
No, that's sufficient plot, though it is a wild ending, and for what it ended up being a relatively straightforward story, it's nice to get a little potentially abstract towards the end, which is cool.
Sure. Yeah.
Let's hop into some standard questions. My favorite, who was your person? You need a better word for person, though. It's got to be fun. It's got to be snappy. Who was your char? Stooge. No, that means something else. Who is your goober? I don't know. It's gone. Davy, I can't wait. This is my favorite part. Tell me who your favorite character was.
Gone if it was even there. I don't know. That was a little mess there.
I'll chop that up.
I was struggling a little bit. I really enjoyed a lot of the characters. I really enjoyed the Poisoner. There's a scene early on where like he's like, "Hey, I came up with something cool and new," and drops his bag to like pull something out of it. And you just hear shattering glass. And I was like, I just love that. Like they kind of get by on like carelessness and luck. You know, It's pretty fun. But I decided to go with someone I could identify with, and that was the Troggoths that get up, do some stuff, and be like, "Man, I am tired. I am going back to sleep." So I felt that way for sure. So
yeah,
the Troggoths that went brawled a little bit and said, "You know what's best is a little more bedtime."
Yeah, that's enough for me. Good answer. Twofold answer. While reading the book, the character that I thought might have had the most potential was Shriekstone itself was the mountain, and I thought there was going to be some payoff there, and I wanted to see how it was like the victim, or like that it had more power than or more power here. It had more agency than we realized. But it turns out that never happened, so I have to scrap that answer. It could have been the right answer, but it's not. And instead, I think I'll probably do the Strangler, Throttle. His name's Throttle. He's some sort of strangle grot because he knows what he's good at, and he does it well, and he made a job out of it, right? Like he identified what skills he had, and he found a way to make himself useful to an organization, and I can respect that. And what I imagine is very chaotic. He made himself indispensable. So good job, Throttle. Though the Poisoner, in terms of who had character traits, the Poisoner was probably the most fun, I think, in the story. But
sure.
Can't go with the obvious answer. Next, did you learn anything about the mortal realms that you didn't know before?
For me, I think it was the idea of like we always hear about the sentient mountains, but I don't think I've heard the idea of that symbiotic relationship. So like the idea that fire slayers from Gur, would treat the mountain as like a sentient companion or some such. And I thought that was a cool thing that kind of opened up. I don't know, like we talk about this a lot. Like it's fun to think about what a faction looks like in different realms. Mm-hmm. And so that was the piece that I felt like was a broader understanding. There's plenty I enjoyed. Got some more depth on Gloomspite, but if I was to say something I knew about the mortal realms now that I didn't know before, maybe it'd be that.
Yeah,
what about you?
That's a good answer, and I echo that response. But then furthermore, I didn't know the pocket squigs were a thing.
I'm so glad they are.
Yeah, and at one point, like this is like a pocket sand equivalent, or I don't know. Someone's got a pocket full of tiny squigs, and they throw it at some guy, and that's all you need to know. There's not much else to add beyond that, but they exist because, of course, they exist.
Yeah.
Question is, do they stay small, or are they just baby squigs? I don't know.
Yeah. Who knows?
Is it its own breed? There's so much more to learn. I need the sequel. Pocket squigs. Nobody expects pocket squigs. All right. We can jump on to any recommendations for other Gloomspite stories. We mentioned one, which is the titular Gloomspite novel by Andy Clark, which I recommend you read only so that you get exposure to Gloomspite, but you're not necessarily going to get the perspective. It's still a really good story. You guys can't see my hands. I'm really talking a lot here with them.
Excellent, but yeah, it is not from Gloomspite perspective, but it was one of my favorite books we read, for one of my favorite novels that we read for this.
Yeah,
and if you want to hear a very contentious story phase, you can listen back to the episode where we talk it out.
You know how we mentioned that it's contentious a lot. I don't remember in the middle of it feeling contentious, but the fact that we keep referencing that it must mean that it was, and I'm just oblivious to I think, Paul's feelings.
Paul and I came down on very different sides of whether it was good or not. So
I got you. Well, I'm sure you guys were looking for different things.
Constructive debate. I think it was good. And you don't always want everyone to agree on everything.
Well, of course not. Yeah, great characters in that one, and I think that was where it's shown. But there are other Gloomspite stories. Are there any others that you would recommend before I just name the ones that are written down right here?
Well, I did read Bosgrot by Eric Gregory prior to this. If you want a different take on Grot leadership, then Bosgrot by Eric Gregory is a good read.
Okay.
It kind of takes a different route, but it's very complementary to this. Like it's a cool, almost not a companion in the sense that it's the same characters or anything like that, but a loon boss going through some stuff. And then, like Rat Gob goes through some stuff.
Too true. And then I think you wrote this one. Do you want to talk about this one too?
Also, one that we reviewed was Path to Glory. Nothing to do with Gloomspite at all, but I like that one quite a bit. Different angles, and I like how Evan Dicken writes his character interactions. I think that felt like the strong point here for me.
Yeah. Let's hop into a review with what little time we have left, as if there were a time limit. What did you think of Shriekstone, a Gloomspite Gets short story?
Really enjoyable. I'm really glad we read it. It's one of the short story. I don't know. I mean, in general, you're going to get positive reviews from us, I think, on this because we, me especially, but I think you as well, enjoy these short stories quite a bit. I think it's, we've said many, many times, but it's where some of the Age of Sigmar fiction can really shine. I thought it was great. There were, like I said, I got some laugh out louds. For the subject matter and for all that, I found it very engaging and very enjoyable. This is a game world that I'm interested in, but they're not factions that I have necessarily played. So to still be engaged despite that was pretty awesome. I thought it was great. I thought it was really efficient, and I'll give it 4.5 out of 5 cunning plots to defeat invading fire slayers.
Okay. All right, my end. I did like the short story. There's very few short stories I don't like. I liked the traps. I liked the Home Alone aspect of the story. It was a good tale. It was told well. There wasn't a lot of extraneous stuff. It was concise. It was clear, but at the same time, it was surprising to sort of see the things that could have been telegraphed, surprising to sort of see them implemented or in action. And so in doing so, I really enjoyed what happened. I enjoyed the plot. The characters were great in that goblins can be great or grots can be great. And so that's in and of itself is, makes for interesting, fun sort of interactions in between them. If I had a complaint or a concern or, some detraction from the story is that sometimes the grottiness of grots is the only thing that you get out of them, and they all sort of tend towards similarity. Like maybe one has long fingers and he strangles people, or one's really into poisons, but they all sort of function in the same way. And that's not Evan Dicken. It's not his fault. Like that's what grots do. That's what grot stories are. But maybe a problem I have with grot stories just universally is that like they all sort of blend together. They feel sometimes universal in their grottiness, and it doesn't allow for anyone to really stand out one way or the other. I mean, Ratgab does because I'm in his brain and I just know what he's thinking, but I'm sure every single one of those dudes was also thinking very similar thoughts throughout. It's just that he was put in a position of power. So
I will say yes, but his turn towards some amount of bravery or some like defend my home sort of thing was kind of a standout for me as far as a characteristic we rarely see from these characters who we usually see as not quite nameless, faceless, but almost that villain.
That's actually a very good point, and I remember thinking that I was maybe a little more down on this story, and that it was just sort of more of the same when it comes to Grotz after having read it. But then, classically, whenever we talk about it, I feel that I enjoy it more and more. Talking about it makes me like the story more, and the points like that you just brought up, I think, do enhance my enjoyment of the characters that I'm reading. And I think last time we did one of these short stories, I talked at length about how important the characters ought to be. And so if you can sort of suss out the nuance of even what ends up being sort of bog standard Grotz, get what nuance you can, I think that it enhances the story. And I think this did a pretty good job at doing so. And if it didn't do a great job, it's not his fault. It's Grotz's fault in my mind. So I still recommend it, though. I still enjoyed it, and it's very instructive in terms of what Gloomspite Gits do. Like if you hadn't read a Gloomspite Gits story, don't read Gloomspite. I mean, do, but maybe read this first if you wanted to get an instructional video on what it means to be a Git and how their society works. So useful in that regard too. Yep. So in that case, if I have to give it a number, I'm going to give it just a 4. I don't know what a 5 would be, but we're going to do a 4. 4 long, strangly fingers out of 5 from Throttle, the Strangle Grot.
All right. You got there.
Yeah. Do you have any other final thoughts?
No, just enjoyed picking this one and looking forward to the next one. And also, again, a special thanks to Evan Dicken for getting back to me so fast. In our as usual exhaustive way of researching these books, I sent him something like at 11 p.m. last night. I was like, long shot. We'll see if he, I had these couple of questions about it. And this morning woke up to have some answers. It was super cool. So
he knew. Deep down, he knew. And then I guess I'll also finally say, hey, listeners, if you read this story and you had thoughts on it, let us know what you think. Give us some feedback. Nobody ever gives us any feedback. I want to know. This is a collective here. We're all part of one great big Mortal Realms book club, except we get the microphones. And with that, it's time for our reforging. Chat with us anytime about your thoughts on Twitter at the Mortal Realms. Davey, where can they find you online?
I'm at red_Zeke, or if you want to talk Underworlds, at WTHcast.
Awesome. I'm Aaron. You can find me on Twitter at DosAsos, and you obviously know that you can find me on the story phase as well. Come on, guys. You can find all our Mortal Realms shows and content at www.themortalrealms.com. Nope, again, that's Law & Order. That's not the music.